Chapter 857. Is there news from your adoptive father? Chu Xiu asked directly. Mu Zi nodded and said, Bu Tiannan is out. Adoptive father can contact us at this time. With that said, Mu Zi directly brought Chu Xiu to her room. Mu Zi's room wasn't decorated as exquisitely as other women's. Instead, it was very simple. Aside from the rows of elixirs in the cabinet, there was also a list of tasks and techniques. Mu Zi took out a formation plate with some complicated mechanisms on it. This is the Mother and Child Dragon and Phoenix 1,000 Miles image formation plate refined by the Black Tortoise sect. It is said that it was refined from a strange insect. This kind of strange insect is born with a female and a male. No matter how far apart they are, they can still find each other. However, this kind of strange insect seems to be completely extinct now. This pair of formation plates was found by Uncle Han and Uncle Song when they were carrying out a task. They gave it to adoptive father. As Mu Zi fiddled with it, the formation lit up, and an old man in white appeared in the light. The old man's hair and beard were all white, and he wore a Confucian robe. His facial features were kind and refined, making him look like an old man who taught in an institute. Who could ever have guessed that someone like that would be the second head of the Azure Dragon Society? In fact that the Azure Dragon Society had grown to such a large scale had a lot to do with him. Official Chu, I have heard a lot about you. Duanmu Qianshan smiled and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu also cupped his hands and said, I should be the one who has heard a lot about you. For the Blue Dragon Society to have such a scale, I admire not Bu Tiannan, but you, Senior Duanmu. Duanmu Qianshan shook his head with a wry smile and said, but it is also because of me that the Blue Dragon Society has reached this point. I approved of Bu Tiannan becoming the second dragon head, but now it seems that he is more suitable to be an assassin than to lead the Blue Dragon Society. This is a big mistake. At this point, Duanmu Qianshan's expression became solemn, and he said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, Darren Chu, time is of the essence, so this old man will not keep you in suspense. Regarding the matter of Bu Tiannan, my attitude is the same as Darren Chu, and that is to kill. I want to kill Bu Tiannan not because he deprived me of my power. In fact, if he could manage the Blue Dragon Society well, I would have wanted to retire a long time ago after working for the Blue Dragon Society for my whole life. However, Bu Tiannan is a temperamental person, and the entire Blue Dragon Society has been heading in the wrong direction under his leadership. In addition, he easily believed the slanderous words of villains and acted wantonly in the Blue Dragon Society. The wealth that the Blue Dragon Society has accumulated over the years is no longer enough for Bu Tiannan. Therefore, I am willing to cooperate with official Chu to get rid of Bu Tiannan. Chu Xiu nodded. He was waiting for Duanmu Qianshan to say this. Bu Tiannan was not the Sun or Lu family's ancestor. He was a ruthless person who dared to go against the Great Light Temple Su Yun, and he was even in the top 10 of the honor list. Even though Chu Xiu's strength had greatly improved, it would not be easy to kill him. However, if Duanmu Qianshan cooperated and attacked from both sides, it would be much easier. However, at this moment, Duanmu Qianshan said, however, I have another condition, and I hope that official Chu can agree to it. Oh? What condition? Enter my Blue Dragon Society and become the new chief dragon. Duanmu Qianshan's words were shocking, and even Mu Zi was shocked. This was because Duanmu Qianshan had never mentioned this to her before. Chu Xiu squinted at Duanmu Qianshan. To be honest, he was at ease with Mu Zi, but he had never been at ease with Duanmu Qianshan. Don't be fooled by this old man's kind face, he was just like an old teacher. However, he was an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. To be able to become the second dragon, how many lives had he taken? Moreover, it was this old man in front of him. When he could become the chief dragon, he gave up his position and supported Bu Tiannan. It could be said that everything in the Blue Dragon Society was created by him. Bu Tiannan, who only knew how to kill people and cause trouble, couldn't have done these things. This old man was definitely a ruthless person, but now, he wanted to give the Blue Dragon Society to Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu happily agreed, then he would be a real idiot. Knocking on the table, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Senior Duanmu, are you joking? You and I spent so much effort to kill Butian-nan, but in the end, you want to give the Blue Dragon Society to an outsider like me. What are you after? In the entire Blue Dragon Society, whether it is the headquarters or the 36 Big Dipper divisions, half of them respect you. As long as you kill Butian-nan, you will become the chief dragon. Aside from a few diehard supporters of Butian-nan, who in the entire Blue Dragon Society will not be convinced? Why do you still want to give the Blue Dragon Society to me?" Duanmu Qianshan sighed, shook his head, and said, "Official Chu is wrong. I don't want to give the Blue Dragon Society to you, but I want you to become the chief dragon to guarantee the interests of the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, you can also understand it as the Blue Dragon Society joining hands with you. You can use the power of the Blue Dragon Society, but you have to guarantee the interests of the Blue Dragon Society first." "That's right, Official Chu, what do you think of the Blue Dragon Society now? What will the future hold?" Chu Xiu thought for a moment and said, "Not much. Senior Duanmu, you did a good job before. The Blue Dragon Society is just a sword in the hands of the people of the martial world. As long as there are killings and hatred in the martial world, the Blue Dragon Society will have its value. In fact, the more killings there are, the stronger the Blue Dragon Society will become. But now, it is different. The Blue Dragon Society is mixed with too much karma. A sword mixed with so much karma is no longer useful. Even if we kill Butian-nan now, the karma has already been formed. It will not be easy to get rid of it completely." Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, "That's right. Official Chu, you see it very clearly. The cycle of karma and retribution. Many people in the martial world know this, but no one can avoid it. Even if Butian-nan dies, the karma that my Blue Dragon Society has formed will be repaid by the remaining people. Therefore, I handed the Blue Dragon Society to you, Official Chu. I want to borrow Official Chu's hand to block this karma and help the future of the Blue Dragon Society." Duanmu Qianshan pointed at himself and smiled bitterly. "I am already old and can't fight anymore. Back then, I gave the position of First Dragon Head to Butian-nan because he will be stronger than me in the future. I misjudged him once, but I believe that I will not misjudge him a second time. Now, Official Chu, you are already stronger than I. In the entire martial world, the only person who can bear the karma for the Blue Dragon Society and is willing to do so is you, Official Chu. Strictly speaking, Official Chu, you are also from the Blue Dragon Society. If you take over the position of First Dragon Head, the impact on the people below will be smaller." Chu Xiu smiled faintly and said, "Senior Duanmu, how do you know that I am willing?" Duanmu Qianshan said in a deep voice, "Because the Blue Dragon Society is qualified and strong enough to give Official Chu enough strength and influence. Although the current Blue Dragon Society cannot be compared to the sects that stand at the peak of the martial world, as the head of the four spirits, the Blue Dragon Society is strong enough to destroy all the martial world forces that are one rank lower." Chu Xiu looked at Duanmu Qianshan deeply. Although this old man misjudged him once, this time, he really saw through Chu Xiu's heart. The power of the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu really wanted it. It was not because of anything else, but because the Blue Dragon Society was really strong. At present, Chu Xiu mainly had 3 groups of people under him. One of them was a martial artist from the Guanzhong torture room. Their fighting strength was average, but their ability was outstanding and suitable for defending. The other group was given to him by Wei Shuya. They were some of the younger martial artists from the Hidden Devil clan. These martial artists were not weak and had great potential. However, their personalities were different, so it was not easy to control them. The last group was the first group that followed him. They were martial artists from the Heavenly Sin branch of the Blue Dragon Society. These people were the most useful. They were all elite assassins from the Heavenly Sin branch. They were strong, ruthless, and obedient. They were simply the best killing machines. If a person from the Heavenly Sin branch had this kind of power, then if Chu Xiu took in the entire Blue Dragon Society, the power would be unimaginable. However, Chu Xiu did not agree immediately. He only said indifferently, "Senior Duanmu, Bu Tiannan is very afraid of you now. Aren't you afraid that I will also be afraid of you when I take over the position of First Dragon Head? You have to know that it is a very serious matter to have one's achievements overshadow the leader." Duanmu Qianshan shook his head and said, "Of course not. Official Chu, if you were really such a person, the Zhenwu Hall would not have developed to such a scale. Moreover, Official Chu, even if you are afraid of me, it is not a big deal. Because at this stage, only I can help you, Official Chu. If Bu Tiannan really dies, Official Chu, you can only rely on I's prestige to control the entire Blue Dragon Society. Furthermore, this old man doesn't have much longer to live. By the time this old man dies, Lord Chu's prestige will already be set. Moreover, I does not have any heirs or inheritors. So, Official Chu, you do not have to worry that someone will fight for power with you." At this point, Duanmu Qianshan glanced at the silent Mu Zi and said, "If you want to talk about inheritors, this girl can be considered one. However, my silly daughter listens to Sir Chu's every word. Sir Chu's words are more effective than mine. She won't betray anyone who dares to betray you. After I dies, this silly girl will definitely be loyal to you, Official Chu. At that time, Blue Dragon Society will completely belong to you, Official Chu. After that, whether Official Chu is willing to maintain the Blue Dragon Society or do something else, I will already be in the grave by then, so I will not be able to care so much." After Duanmu Qianshan finished speaking, Mu Zi's face was a little red. She did not expect that Duanmu Qianshan would suddenly mention her. She secretly glanced at Chu Xiu and found that Chu Xiu was in deep thought. In fact, when dealing with an old fox like Duanmu Qianshan, one must be cautious. However, Chu Xiu also found that Duanmu Qianshan was very similar to Wei Shuya. They were both old and scheming for the sake of their foundation, but not for themselves. This matter was more beneficial than harmful to Chu Xiu, at least for now. So, after thinking for a moment, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. I also want to sit in Bu Tiannan's position." Chapter 858. Knowing that Chu Xiu could enter the Blue Dragon Society, Mu Zi was the happiest one. It was needless to say what Chu Xiu meant to Mu Zi, and Duanmu Qianshan treated her like his own daughter. Therefore, Mu Zi had always been worried that Chu Xiu would become enemies with the Blue Dragon Society because of Bu Tiannan. But now, Chu Xiu had entered the Blue Dragon Society. Not only did they not have to be enemies, but they could also be on the same side. Because time was limited, Chu Xiu was afraid that Bu Tiannan would suddenly return. After reaching an agreement with Duanmu Qianshan, they quickly agreed on the next plan. 3 months later was the triennial gathering of the Blue Dragon Society. At this time, the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions would return to the headquarters and report on their recent missions. Originally, these things were handled by Duanmu Qianshan, but now that Duanmu Qianshan was imprisoned, these things were thrown by Bu Tiannan to a layman like Duan Tianlang. No one knew how well he could do. Chu Xiu and Duanmu Qianshan agreed to take action at this time to get rid of Bu Tiannan and enter the Blue Dragon Society. However, during this time, Chu Xiu could not be idle. Although he had stayed in the Blue Dragon Society before, he was just an ordinary low-level assassin. Now that Chu Xiu was going to be the leader of the Azure Dragon Society, he had to pick out a few outstanding battle achievements. That way, he would be able to answer to his subordinates. Therefore, during this time, the assassin's branch was temporarily under Chu Xiu's control. He could also complete a big mission as a proof of loyalty. Chu Xiu was also very curious. Wouldn't the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society take care of this matter? Duanmu Qianshan's answer made Chu Xiu speechless. In the past, there were indeed people in charge. The branch leader had to be personally appointed by the great dragon head. Furthermore, every year, they had to report everything that happened in the branch. In the end, Bu Tiannan found it troublesome, but he was still worried about Duanmu Qianshan holding too much power, so he let the major divisions manage independently, and only reported to the higher-ups once every 3 years. This was also the reason why Duan Tianlang dared to scheme against his subordinates when Chu Xiu was still in the Heavenly Sin branch. No one would care about it. Hearing this, Chu Xiu was also a little speechless. The Blue Dragon Society had not completely collapsed after being toyed with by Bu Tiannan. Other than Duanmu Qianshan's patience, it could only be said that Bu Tiannan was lucky. The world of martial arts was huge, and there were definitely times when the news did not come and go in a timely manner. But no matter how late it was, the headquarters still had to keep an eye on the news of the various branches at all times to prevent their subordinates from growing too powerful. For example, although the headquarters of the wind-sweeping building was in Eastern Qi, the Northern Yan branch and the West Chu branch were in contact almost all the time. Although the other sects did not communicate as frequently as the wind-sweeping building, they would not be like Bu Tiannan, who did not care once every 3 years and allowed his subordinates to do as they pleased. Since he had decided to act as a member of the Assassin's branch, Chu Xiu naturally had to think of another identity. In the world of martial arts, it was absolutely necessary to have a smuff. Previously, Chu Xiu had used the name Lin Yi. Naturally, he could not use it anymore, so Chu Xiu directly changed his name to Lin Shui. When Luo Feiheng heard this name, he felt a little strange. Chu Xiu usually liked to wear black clothes, so why was he called Shui? Chu Xiu explained that he had killed many people, so the blood was enough to dye the black clothes red. However, Luo Feiheng ridiculed him on the side. Chu Xiu was purely showing off out of habit. In terms of pretentiousness, Shui was obviously much better than black-clothed. After looking through the missions of the Assassin's branch, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Eastern Qi is such a big place, and the Assassin's branch only has these few missions? There is not a single one that can be taken out." It was not that Chu Xiu felt that the missions were too difficult, but that they were too simple. Since it was to prove his loyalty, he naturally had to make a name for himself. However, the strongest assassination targets in these missions were only at the unity of the world realm. For Chu Xiu, the difficulty was too low. Song Shao smiled bitterly and said, "Official Chu, the Assassin's branch is just a branch. This is already the highest number of missions that they can receive. A mission to assassinate a martial Dao Grandmaster would definitely be sent to the headquarters. They wouldn't come to our Assassin's branch." Chu Xiu nodded and looked at Luo Feiheng. "Right, do you have any enemies? I can help you eliminate them for free. It's a rare opportunity." Luo Feiheng's eyes twitched. To be honest, although the Luo family was struggling at death's door, she really wanted to eliminate that disgusting family. However, the Luo family was the place where she was born and raised. She was not Chu Xiu, who would not be so heartless as to eliminate her own family. However, Luo Feiheng suddenly thought of something. She quickly said, "There is indeed a force that has some enmity with me, but they also have an indirect enmity with you." "What force?" "One of the 7 sects, the Longevity Sword sect." Chu Xiu thought for a moment and shook his head. "Never heard of it." Luo Feiheng said, "Back then, after you eliminated the Azure Water Sword sect, in order to seize the position of one of the 7 sects, there was quite a commotion in the martial world. In the end, the Longevity Sword sect won. The reason why the Longevity Sword sect was able to seize the position was actually related to the Hidden Sword Villa. The sect leader of the Longevity Sword sect, Fang Chongsheng, and the manor lord of the Hidden Sword Villa, Cheng Tingshan, were sworn brothers. Fang Chongsheng himself was supported by Cheng Tingshan, and even the divine weapon in his hand, the 36th ranked flowing fire, was given to him by Cheng Tingshan. From what I know, you have quite a deep enmity with the Hidden Sword Villa. Back then, Cheng Tingshan was one of the people who brought the Heaven Gate Divine General to kill you. With the relationship between the two of them, if you want to deal with the Hidden Sword Villa in the future, the entire Longevity Sword sect will stand with the Hidden Sword Villa. Now that you have dealt with them, it can be considered as taking the initiative to gain the upper hand. Of course, this Longevity Sword sect is also very detestable. Do they really think that they can be so arrogant just because they are one of the 7 sects and 8 schools? Previously, they even dared to touch the people of my 9 divisions. If it wasn't for Dean Xiao telling me to calm down, this old lady would definitely not let them off. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "All right then, the first battle shall be against the Longevity Sword sect." At this moment, Luo Feiheng spoke again, "Oh right, there is one more thing. Your Heavenly Law War case has been forged. You can go and collect it now." Chu Xiu was slightly startled, so fast. Normally, forging a divine weapon would take a month, and some would take a few years. As a blacksmith master, it was possible for Mo Yezi to forge a divine weapon in a month. However, Chu Xiu had seen the blueprints of the Heavenly Law War case. There were many complicated mechanisms, and it didn't seem like it could be forged in a short period of time. Luo Feiheng said, "I also don't know what happened, but Godfather said that although the weapon was forged, there was a problem and he needed to inform you." Chu Xiu nodded and followed Luo Feiheng to the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, it was not convenient for Chu Xiu to show his original appearance, so he directly put on the Blue Dragon Society mask and black iron conical hat. He put on a blood-red robe and followed Luo Feiheng to the Mirror Lake Villa at night. When Mo Yezi first saw Chu Xiu, he wasn't surprised. He was a veteran in the pugilistic world. Although he had only been forging for many years and didn't participate in the pugilistic world's disputes, he had experienced many things. Resurrection might seem mysterious to others, but it wasn't impossible. Therefore, Mo Yezi didn't say much and directly took out the Heavenly Law War case. It was a silver-white iron case that was 3 feet long. There were countless runes engraved on it, and it didn't look ordinary. Mo Yezi said, "Chu, you can give it a try." Chu Xiu nodded and channeled a strand of vital energy into the Heaven's Way War case. In an instant, he sensed that the weapon spirit in the Heaven's Way War case was responding to him. At the next moment, a series of crisp mechanical sounds rang out, and the Heaven's Way War case turned into a huge battle blade. Different from the demonic dance's scimitar, this huge war saber was almost as tall as a person. The blade was wide, and the handle was long and narrow. It looked very domineering. The war saber evolved from the Heavenly Law War case was called the Peerless Heavenly Saber. As Chu Xiu poured qi into it again, the Peerless Heavenly Saber turned into a long spear. According to the blueprint, it should be called the Heaven-Seeking Tyrannical Spear. Chu Xiu said doubtfully, "The Heavenly Law War case is refined very well. It's basically the same as described in the blueprint. What's the problem?" Mo Yezi shook his head and said, "This is not the peak state of the Heavenly Law War case. According to the blueprint, the Heavenly Law War case should be a supreme-grade weapon at its peak. But look at it now. The strength of the weapon transformed by the Heavenly Law War case is only between low-grade and mid-grade. It can't even reach high-grade. This kind of strength is far inferior to your demonic dance, and it can't bring out its full effect. At the end of the day, it's still a problem of materials. The materials you gave me are some extremely precious refining materials. They can be considered supreme grade. However, there's still a key material missing to forge the core of the Heavenly Law War case. I replaced it with other materials. Although I succeeded, as you can see, its strength doesn't meet the peak standard of the heavenly law war case. Where can I find that material? Mo Yezi hesitated for a moment and said, the material is called the meteorite iron. When a meteorite falls from the sky to the ground, because of its extreme speed, it burns in the heaven and earth yuan qi. Finally, with the power of the heaven and earth, it is refined into gold. Moreover, when it falls, it must fall into a cold pond in an extremely cold place. In an instant, the cold and heat alternates, and only then can the meteorite iron be created. However, although meteorites from outer space are common, it's rare for it to be refined into gold when it falls. Moreover, it's even rarer for it to fall into a cold pond. So far, the only weapon made from the meteorite iron that I know of is the 26th divine weapon in the famous sword manual, the Flowing Light Evil Moon. It's currently in the Hidden Sword Villa's collection. Chu Xiu's squinted eyes revealed a hint of coldness. The Hidden Sword Villa again. When it was time to settle the score with the Hidden Sword Villa, he would have another reason. Chapter 859. The Longevity Sword sect wasn't actually located in eastern Qi, but in Wei County. To be more precise, it was a new sect built on the site of the Azure Water Sword sect. The Azure Water Sword sect used to be the #1 sect in Wei County. With the combined strength of the entire Wei County, it was enough to support the Azure Water Sword sect. Therefore, it was such a waste to leave such a place unattended. The Longevity Sword sect's Fang Chongsheng was quite a character and had good foresight. He immediately took a liking to this unclaimed land and saved himself a lot of trouble. Moreover, the Azure Water Sword sect was indeed a good place. The mountains were verdant, the water was clear, and the feng shui was good. Otherwise, the Azure Water Sword sect's ancestors wouldn't have built the sect here. At the same time, in the Azure Water Sword sect, in the Longevity Sword sect, Fang Chongsheng looked at the surrounding pavilions and nodded in satisfaction. Fang Chongsheng was a middle-aged martial artist with a dignified appearance. He wore a white robe and had a tall stature. He looked dignified without being angry and had the bearing of a sect leader. However, only he and his sworn brother, Cheng Tingshan, knew just how low Fang Chongsheng's starting point was. In his early years, he was an illiterate farmer's son. His name wasn't Fang Chongsheng, but Fang Shuisheng. It was only when he accidentally came into contact with the martial Dao that he stepped into the pugilistic world step by step. After decades of hard work, he finally had the foundation he had today. Outsiders said that he was just a dog raised by Cheng Tingshan. Now that he was one of the 7 sects, he still listened to the Hidden Sword Villa. It was embarrassing, but Fang Chongsheng didn't care. Those people were just jealous. They wanted the support of the Hidden Sword Villa but didn't have the chance. What right did he have to become sworn brothers with Cheng Tingshan? It was because he helped Cheng Tingshan block 3 slashes and almost had his Dantian destroyed. These 3 slashes were exchanged for Cheng Tingshan's unconditional trust, the Wildfire Divine Weapon, and the foundation of the Longevity Sword sect. Fang Chongsheng called over a trusted disciple and asked, "How many sects in Wei County have yet to send their visiting cards?" The disciple hesitated for a moment before replying, 60%. Fang Chongsheng couldn't help but snort, "They won't give up until they see the coffin. If our Longevity Sword sect doesn't make a move, do you really think we're pushovers?" In the past, the Azure Water Sword sect had already declined to such a state, but this group of people were still respectful. Now that my Longevity Sword sect is here, they are still unconvinced. This is simply preposterous. Although that was what Fang Chongsheng said, he also felt very helpless. In the past, the Azure Water Sword sect was able to possess such prowess because of Lu Gongyuan's reputation. Although fame was something that couldn't be seen or touched, it was something that had to be fought for. Even though the Azure Water Sword sect was in a weakened state and wasn't even comparable to the current Longevity Sword sect, there weren't many in the entire Wei County that dared to provoke Lu Gongyuan. Although Fang Changsheng's longevity sword sect had become one of the 7 sects, his reputation was far inferior to Lu Gongyuan's. Most of the martial arts factions in Wei County still had some conflict with the longevity sword sect, a foreign martial arts faction. Right at this moment, at the foot of the longevity sword sect's mountain, Chu Xiu, Mu Zi, Han Lei, Song Xiao, and a group of assassins from the Blue Dragon Society were walking up the mountain path of the longevity sword sect in broad daylight. Assassins weren't assassins. As long as they could kill someone, they could use any method. Just like Butian-nan, he never used any assassination methods. Once he received a mission, he would simply kill his way over. If someone blocked his way, he would kill them all. Once he killed everyone, he would be an assassin. Although Chu Xiu didn't really approve of such behavior, in the face of absolute strength, he didn't need to use those little tricks. Looking at the surrounding scenery, Chu Xiu shook his head gently and said, "When I came to the Azure Water Sword sect in the past, I mentioned that the feng shui of this place isn't too good." Song Xiao looked around suspiciously and said doubtfully, "The scenery here isn't too bad. Verdant hills and limpid waters." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "That time, the Azure Water Sword sect was annihilated. Now, the longevity sword sect is going to be annihilated too. Is this feng shui considered good?" Song Xiao shrunk his neck. He wanted to say that it wasn't the Azure Water Sword sect's feng shui that wasn't good. It was official Chu's feng shui that wasn't good. Whoever provoked him would be unlucky. At this moment, there were many martial artists from the other Wei County's martial arts sects on the mountain path leading to the longevity sword sect. Although most of the martial arts factions in the Wei County didn't have a good impression of the longevity sword sect, there were still some who were willing to join the longevity sword sect. Therefore, they would occasionally come to the longevity sword sect to report on certain situations and to maintain a good relationship. When they saw a group of people wearing the Blue Dragon Society's signature masks and iron conical hats ascending the mountain, this group of people immediately panicked. Nothing good would come out of being associated with the Blue Dragon Society. It was a matter of life and death. The group immediately went up the mountain and reported this matter to Fang Changsheng. Chu Xiu and the others didn't intercept them. When Chu Xiu and the others set foot on the mountain gate of the longevity sword sect, Fang Changsheng and the other longevity sword sect people were already watching Chu Xiu and the others vigilantly. But Chu Xiu didn't look at them. He just looked at the scenery in front of him and sighed, "Things are still the same, but people have changed." In the past, the Azure Water Sword sect could be said to be completely destroyed in the hands of Chu Xiu, especially Shenbai. With the 10,000 swords returned to origin, if there was no Chu Xiu, Shenbai would have stepped into the real pellet state now, which was enough to be on par with Zhong Xian, Fang Qi Shao, and the others. It was a pity that there were no ifs in this world. No matter how amazing you were, death was death. A dead genius was worthless. Lu Jiang, he disdainfully said in the blood soul bead, "Hypocrite. You were the one who destroyed them, why are you still sighing here?" Chu Xiu ignored Lu Jiang. Fang Changsheng looked at Chu Xiu and the others vigilantly, cupped his fist, and said in a deep voice, "I don't know why the Blue Dragon Society came to my longevity sword sect." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Sect Master Fang is pretending to be confused. What else can the Blue Dragon Society do? Of course, it is to kill." Although the longevity sword sect had already guessed it, now that Chu Xiu said it in front of them, it still made their faces change suddenly. As the head of the Four Spirits, the largest assassin organization in the underworld, the terror of the Blue Dragon Society was needless to say. Although the Blue Dragon Society was not a demonic Dao, their reputation in the underworld was as bad as the demonic Dao martial artists. After all, Fang Changsheng was also someone who had fought his way up in the underworld. He had a lot of experience, and he knew the rules of the Blue Dragon Society very well. Therefore, he didn't seem to panic. Fang Changsheng just took a deep breath and said, "I am really curious. Just who could hire the Blue Dragon Society to kill me, a sect master and a martial arts grandmaster? Although I, Fang Chongsheng, have made many enemies in the underworld, my enemies shouldn't be so generous. Everyone, I don't know who hired you to kill me, but I also know that the Blue Dragon Society can't reveal the name of the employer because of the rules. That said, the Azure Dragon Society only kills people for profit. I, Fang Chongsheng, am willing to double the price of whatever the client offered. You guys go kill him. That way, the Azure Dragon Society will still be killing people, but you'll be earning triple the reward. Although the Blue Dragon Society also had missions to assassinate martial arts grandmasters, such missions were very rare. They were basically done by the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. It wasn't a problem of strength, but most people couldn't afford the price. The price to assassinate a martial arts grandmaster was simply sky high, and ordinary people couldn't afford it. On the contrary, if they could afford it, they naturally had the strength to kill themselves, and they didn't need to spend a lot of money to hire people from the Blue Dragon Society. Thus, Fang Chongsheng speculated that the person who wanted to kill him must have gone all out in order to come up with a reward that barely met the standard. Although his longevity sword sect had only just been established, it still had quite a bit of wealth. Spending money to avert disaster and get rid of an enemy hidden in the dark was a good thing. However, at this time, Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Sect Master Fang, you must be joking. As people in the underworld, we pay attention to trustworthiness. As a person, we should keep our word. Although the Azure Dragon Society is an assassin organization, we still have our principles. Since I've accepted your money, I'll have to take your life. In the future, when you become a ghost, don't come to me to collect the debt." Fang Chongsheng's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. Then today, must you all go to the extreme? I know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If you all die here today, the Blue Dragon Society won't find trouble with me, but with the employer. If you want to kill me with just a few people, I'm afraid you are underestimating the longevity sword sect. As soon as he finished speaking, Fang Chongsheng directly waved his hand, and hundreds of longevity sword sect disciples immediately wielded their long swords and formed a sword formation, surrounding Chu Xiu. As the earth energy exploded, biting cold sword chi drifted, but it didn't attack Chu Xiu. Instead, it merged into Fang Chongsheng's body. The reason why the longevity sword sect was able to become one of the new 7 sects and 8 schools wasn't just because of the support of the hidden sword villa. All these years, Fang Chongsheng had been conscientiously managing his faction, and the standard of the disciples was even stronger than the Azure Water Sword sect in the past. With the support of countless sword chi in the sword formation, Fang Chongsheng's sword chi soared into the sky. The long sword in his hand emitted a scorching aura, just like the explosion of a meteor from outer space. It was blinding and dazzling. This was the divine weapon that Cheng Tingshan gifted to Fang Chongsheng, ranked 36th in the sword spectrum, Wildfire. With a thrust of the sword, thousands of sword chi fused into his body. Fang Chongsheng's sword was like an immortal in the heavenly palace, descending from the sky with sword chi soaring into the sky. Immortal caresses my head, tie my hair and receive eternal life. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and his left hand passed through the endless sword chi and actually grabbed the divine weapon, Wildfire. His right fist blasted out, and the fist force was like a tsunami, tearing everything in front of him apart. Black Tortoise True Technique, Mountain and Sea Fist Sutra. The sword chi shattered, the earth energy exploded, and Fang Chongsheng's body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Only the divine weapon, Wildfire, was still in Chu Xiu's hand. As the blood mist dissipated, the entire mountain gate fell silent. Chapter 860. In any place in the underworld, the real pellet state was considered an expert and a powerhouse. As a result, they watched a real pellet state master being punched into a cloud of blood mist. This scene was simply shocking. Glancing at the crowd around him, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Blue Dragon Society is killing people. Unrelated people, please leave. If there is any accidental injury, you can come to the Blue Dragon Society to resolve it. Well, one last thing, I am Lin Shui of the Blue Dragon Society. In the future, if there is any hatred of killing one's father or stealing one's wife, you can come to the Blue Dragon Society to resolve it. Of course, the reward must be sufficient. The result will definitely satisfy everyone. As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the surrounding people suddenly dispersed in horror. They watched as Han Lei, Song Shao, and the others began to massacre the Longevity Sword sect. After a quarter of an hour, the entire Longevity Sword sect was either dead or escaped. Chu Xiu leisurely left with his men. Everyone present secretly shook their heads as they looked at the mountain gate that was once again covered in fresh blood. A few years ago, they had witnessed the destruction of the Kanglan Sword sect here, and now, they had witnessed the destruction of the Longevity Sword sect. The feng shui of this place seemed to be problematic. Otherwise, how could it be destroyed twice in just a few years? As soon as the incident of the Longevity Sword sect came out, the entire underworld was in an uproar. It wasn't that the underworld hadn't seen the annihilation of a sect before. Even sects that were stronger than the Longevity Sword sect were annihilated. However, this time, the Longevity Sword sect was destroyed too quickly. In less than half an hour, the Longevity Sword sect, one of the 7 new sects, was destroyed. It was simply unbelievable. At the same time, everyone also heard that Cheng Tingshan of the Hidden Sword Villa was so angry that he smashed several teacups, wanting to avenge his sworn brother. Of course, this was mainly for outsiders to see. Even if Cheng Tingshan wanted to find someone, he had no chance. Everyone knew that the Blue Dragon Society was just a sword in the hands of the employer, but who knew the real sword user? Moreover, Cheng Tingshan didn't dare to cause trouble for the Blue Dragon Society. Lin Shui, who had appeared out of nowhere, had killed Fang Chongsheng with a single punch. This kind of strength was simply terrifying. Cheng Tingshan knew the ins and outs of Fang Chongsheng. Because of this, he could roughly estimate how terrifying this fellow called Lin Shui was. Also, the Hidden Sword Mountain Villa really couldn't afford to offend the Blue Dragon Society. They couldn't afford to offend that lunatic, Lu Tiannan. He could only express his stance. It was impossible for him to go to the Blue Dragon Society for an explanation. However, no matter what, through this battle, Lin Shui's name had completely spread throughout the underworld. Everyone was wondering where such a ruthless person had come from in the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, compared to them, the Blue Dragon Society was even more confused. Although the Blue Dragon Society was large, it wasn't so large that it couldn't recognize its own people. They had never heard of the name Lin Shui. However, when they heard that the other party was from the Heavenly Assassins branch, they fell silent. The current atmosphere in the Blue Dragon Society was very subtle. Previously, the Great Dragon Head and the Second Dragon Head were cooperating well. One was in charge of internal affairs, while the other was in charge of external affairs. The foundation of the Blue Dragon Society seemed to be flourishing with each passing day. As a result, it was unknown when the two sides became hostile. In the beginning, it was just a quarrel. In the end, it even turned into a power struggle. Now, it had evolved into a direct confrontation. Even Duanmu Qianshan was imprisoned by Butiannan, not allowing him to take a step out of the Blue Dragon Society. The Heavenly Assassins branch was Duanmu Qianshan's trusted subordinate. 2 of Duanmu Qianshan's trusted subordinates, as well as his adopted daughter, were now in the Heavenly Assassins branch. Who knew if this Lin Shui was secretly trained by Duanmu Qianshan? The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering was imminent. However, the leaders of the 36 Heavenly Dipper divisions had a feeling that a storm was brewing. Although these people were scattered all over the underworld, and a leader of a division already had a lot of power, in fact, what they really relied on was the Blue Dragon Society itself. With the existence of the Blue Dragon Society, they were only responsible for killing people and did not consider other aspects of the underworld. Without the halo of the Blue Dragon Society, they were afraid that they would have been annihilated countless times already. Therefore, for most of the leaders of the Blue Dragon Society and some of the assassins, they did not want the Blue Dragon Society to be in chaos. 3 months later, on the day of the Blue Dragon Society's gathering, the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society was very mysterious. At least, most people in the underworld did not know where the Blue Dragon Society was located. Even if they knew, they could not enter without permission. The origin of the Blue Dragon Society could be traced back to the top sect of the ancient times, the Four Symbols sect. In the ancient times, the Four Symbols sect was a top sect on the same level as the Three Pure Temple and High Heaven sect. However, for some reason, they did not escape the great calamity of the ancient times and were destroyed. At their peak, the Four Symbols sect had 4 main divisions. The Black Tortoise division was responsible for forging weapons, arranging formations, and refining all kinds of machinery. It was not good at fighting, but it was the most important division for logistics. The Vermilion Bird division was made up of women. They were responsible for refining medicinal pills and raising some exotic plants. Even the chi they cultivated had healing effects. Of course, compared to the Black Tortoise Hall, the Vermilion Bird Hall had some combat power. When they studied exotic flowers and herbs, they would also study some poisons and even goo insects. When it came to a real fight, their combat power was also extraordinary. As for the White Tiger division, it was violent and focused on killing. It was the main combat power of the Four Symbols sect. The Azure Dragon division was the sharp knife of the Four Symbols sect. It had the least number of people and usually did not take action. However, it was like an azure dragon hiding in the deep sea. Once it broke out of the sea, it would be shocking. Therefore, the Azure Dragon division was only responsible for dealing with difficult enemies. Once the Azure Dragon division was mobilized, it was time to fight to the death. The Blue Dragon Society was born from the Azure Dragon division of the Four Symbols sect. Like the White Tiger division, it was the strongest division of the Four Symbols sect in the past. The place where the Blue Dragon Society was located was the main relic left behind by the former Four Symbols sect. After being remodeled, it became the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. This place was located in the mountain range between the border of Eastern Qi and Western Chu. It was surrounded by bewildering formations. Those without the key would have to break the formation by force. Otherwise, they would eventually find their way out. Therefore, even though the Blue Dragon Society was so obvious, there were only a few people who could see the true face of the Blue Dragon Society. Among the 4 spirits, the Blue Dragon Society and the White Tiger division were the most hostile to each other. They even hated each other to the point of fighting to the death as soon as they met. The reason was related to the current headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society. As the inheritors of the Four Symbols sect, the strongest were undoubtedly the Blue Dragon Society and the White Tiger division. They naturally wanted the ruins of the Four Symbols sect to be their headquarters. That way, they would be the head of the 4 spirits and the most authentic inheritors. However, it was clear that the White Tiger division failed in the end and was chased out by the Blue Dragon Society. The hatred was thus formed. Mu Zi led Chu Xiao and the others around the bewildering formation a few times. Only then did the real Blue Dragon Society appear in front of Chu Xiao. What came into view was a huge palace complex, but the shape was extremely strange. The palace complex in the south was like a vermilion bird spreading its wings. Half of its body had collapsed. The palace complex in the north was like a black tortoise lying on the ground. It was the largest and was relatively well preserved. The palace complex in the west was the most damaged. It was so damaged that it couldn't even be seen clearly. That should be where the White Tiger division was located. Only the palace complex in the east was like an azure dragon emerging from the sea. The buildings were towering and over 300 meters tall. However, Chu Xiu could clearly see that the Azure Dragon Palace should have been repaired. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to maintain such a complete appearance under the great calamity of the ancient times. It was the Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering. There were many warriors coming and going from the Blue Dragon Society. Most of them wore the same black iron masks and bamboo hats. Apart from the patterns on the masks, it was difficult to distinguish them. When these people saw Mu Zi, they would stop respectfully and greet her politely as Mississippi. This respect was not directed at Mu Zi. Mu Zi had only been in the Blue Dragon Society for a few years. Of course, she couldn't accumulate this kind of prestige. They were greeting Mu Zi as Miss, but the one they really respected was Duanmu Qianshan. Even though Duanmu Qianshan had fallen out with Butian Nan, most of the branch leaders of the Blue Dragon Society were not idiots. They knew who gave the Blue Dragon Society everything. However, after seeing Chu Xiu, everyone's eyes showed a hint of surprise. Recently, there was a rumor in the pugilistic world that a ruthless person appeared in the Blue Dragon Society. He killed a martial Dao grandmaster with one move and wiped out one of the 7 major sects in half an hour. It should be this person. However, this person seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. They definitely hadn't heard of this name in the Blue Dragon Society before. However, seeing that this person was from Duanmu Qianshan's Assassin's branch, even if some people had doubts, they didn't ask much. Although the second dragon head had fallen out with the great dragon head, he had directly or indirectly managed the Blue Dragon Society for a lifetime. Who knew? At this moment, Duan Tianlang walked out of the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters. When he saw Mu Zi and the others, he walked over with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said lightly, "So it's Miss Mu. If I'm not wrong, the person beside you is Lin Shui, who has recently become famous in the pugilistic world? However, I'm very curious. The Assassin's branch is also one of the 36 branches of the Blue Dragon Society. Without the permission of the Great Dragon Head, who allowed him to take over the Assassin's branch as the branch leader?" Mu Zi said coldly, "These Great Dragon Heads have the right to manage, but who do you think you are? Who are you to interfere in my business?" Duan Tianlang's eyes flashed with anger. He wanted to say something, but he suddenly felt Lin Shui's gaze fall on him. He felt a chill run down his spine, and a shiver ran down his spine. Chapter 861. Duan Tianlang was a typical villain. He bullied the weak and flattered the strong. He was sinister, ruthless, and cold-hearted. But because of this, he was very sensitive to danger. He had heard of this Lin Shui before. He was a guy who had suddenly appeared in the Assassin's branch and had destroyed the Longevity Sword sect in an hour. This battle record was impressive enough. He also suspected that Duanmu Qianshan had secretly nurtured him. But when Lin Shui looked at him, he felt a chill from his head to his bones. Duan Tianlang didn't even dare to say a word. He just turned around and left dejectedly. Mu Zi coldly snorted and said, "This person is the main culprit for the Blue Dragon Society becoming like this. If he did not bewitch the Big Dragon Head, the Big Dragon Head would not have fallen out with adoptive father so quickly and even imprisoned him. He even wanted to bewitch the Big Dragon Head to kill adoptive father. Fortunately, adoptive father's prestige in the Blue Dragon Society is unparalleled. A group of people opposed it and finally gave up." Chu Xiu lightly said, "The main culprit? He is not qualified. The main culprit is still Butian Nan. Duan Tianlang is only a branch leader, but Butian Nan promoted him to the position of one of the Big Dragon Heads. He even put him in an important position. Who else can he blame but him? As a leader, he can ignore things. But if he does not know people well, then he really deserves to die." After saying this, Chu Xiu directly went to see Duanmu Qianshan with Mu Zi. After Duan Tianlang left, he went straight to Butian Nan's room. The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering was approaching. At this time, Bu Tiannan was playing with a delicate golden snake in his room. The golden snake did not look ordinary, but in Bu Tiannan's hand, it was like an earthworm. It shivered and did not even dare to spit out its poisonous fangs. Seeing Duan Tianlang come in, Bu Tiannan yawned and said, "I say, what are you doing here? Isn't the gathering going to last for a few hours?" Duan Tianlang didn't know whether he should be happy or worried about Bu Tiannan's reaction. Following such a boss was very insecure, but it was precisely because of Bu Tiannan's style that he gave him most of the power in the Blue Dragon Society. Duan Tianlang said in a deep voice, "Great Dragon Head, it's Duanmu Qianshan's side that's acting strangely. Recently, a person called Lin Shui appeared in the Jianghu. He led the Assassin's branch and destroyed the Longevity Sword sect in half an hour. However, we have never heard of this person before. Only the people from the Assassin's branch seem to be familiar with him. This person must be a trusted aide that Duanmu Qianshan has secretly nurtured. Duanmu Qianshan actually secretly cultivated a real pellet state martial artist, but we didn't know about it. It's conceivable that this old guy has evil intentions. Great Dragon Head, in my opinion, we should seize this opportunity to kill Duanmu Qianshan in front of everyone. At that time, even if someone were to object, it would be useless since he's already dead." Bu Tiannan snorted when he heard the words and said, "Duan Tianlang, you should take care of the things that you should care about. Don't meddle in the things that you shouldn't meddle in." After spitting out a word, Bu Tiannan's eyes slanted. Duan Tianlang suddenly felt an extreme killing intent wrapped around him. Even now, he couldn't figure out whether Bu Tiannan's killing intent really wanted to kill him or if it was just an unconsciously released momentum. Duanmu Qianshan, that old guy, doesn't have many days left to live. If he was younger and still so ignorant, I would have killed him long ago. But now, is it glorious to kill such an old man? It makes people look down on him for no reason. I don't care if he's Lin Shui or Mu Zi. I've spared his life for the sake of his conscientious assistance in the past. If he still wants to cause trouble, then don't blame me for being merciless." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden snake in Bu Tiannan's hand was crushed into pieces with a loud bang. When you have absolute power, no amount of conspiracies will work. That old man had better behave himself and retire peacefully in the Azure Dragon Society. "He'll be the second dragon head until he dies," Bai Xiaochun said. Duan Tianlang nodded in agreement and carefully retreated. However, he always had a bad feeling, as if something bad was about to happen. Especially that Lin Shui, this person gave him a dangerous feeling, but also a very familiar feeling. At this time, in another house in the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu finally saw Duanmu Qianshan in person. Although Duanmu Qianshan was currently in a state of imprisonment, he could only leave the Blue Dragon Society. His own courtyard was still very well maintained. Chu Xiu even saw some Buddhist scriptures in Duanmu Qianshan's hands. They were not martial arts, but pure Buddhist scriptures. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Senior Duanmu likes Buddhist things? Could it be that you want to atone for your sins? Most of these Buddhist things are just deceiving oneself and others." Duanmu Qianshan smiled and said, "Deceiving yourself and others is the right thing to do. Born in the martial world, everyone is guilty, but no one can convict you of your crime. Unrestrained, lawless, undisciplined. People who can't see clearly will easily get lost in this slaughter." In I's opinion, the most useful thing about Buddhist scriptures is to let you know that there are things in this world that are worthy of your reverence, even if these things are just something you deceive yourself and others. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "From the looks of it, a person like me should belong to the most rebellious type. I cultivate a Buddhist cultivation technique, but I have no respect or fear for the gods and Buddhas." Duanmu Qianshan shook his head and said, "This is not rebellious. This proves that official Chu has a strong heart. I have heard about the happenings in the world. Official Chu, we are going to make our move today. Are you sure you can kill Butian-nan? It's not that this old man doesn't believe you, but this matter is of great importance. If Butian-nan doesn't die, then the Blue Dragon Society will certainly fall into discord. At that time, the White Tiger Hall that has been hostile to the Blue Dragon Society for thousands of years, as well as the karma that our Blue Dragon Society has sown over the years, will surely come knocking on our door. Therefore, Official Chu, please don't blame me. I must get an accurate answer. The Blue Dragon Society's current foundation was inseparable from Duanmu Qianshan's schemes all these years. Although he was the second dragon head, he was more like the third dragon head than Butian-nan. He valued everything about the Blue Dragon Society more. Chu Xiu faintly said, the top 10 on the wind and cloud list are not easy to kill. It would be strange if I said that I have 100% chance of killing Butian-nan. However, Senior Duanmu, you only need to remember one thing. I, Chu Xiu, am a very vengeful person. As long as I want to kill someone, even if I have to endure for 10 or 100 years, I will get my revenge one day. Since I am here today, Butian-nan is someone I must kill. Senior Duanmu doesn't need to say anything, I will do my best. However, the rest is Senior Duanmu's problem. There are still many people in the Blue Dragon Society who are loyal to Butian-nan. If they escape, there will be endless troubles in the future. Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, Official Chu, don't worry. It is better to get the pain over with than over. Those people definitely won't be able to cause any trouble. Once Butian-nan died, the Blue Dragon Society would inevitably fall into a purge. However, if he didn't do this, then when these people betrayed the Blue Dragon Society, it would be equivalent to a split, which would lead to countless troubles. Therefore, even if Duanmu Qianshan didn't want to kill each other, he still had to do it. 6 hours later, all the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions had gathered. The Blue Dragon Society's triennial gathering had officially begun. The gathering place was in the main hall of the Blue Dragon Society. The surroundings were paved with green-gray stone bricks, and the walls were decorated with dim whale oil lamps. There were also some faint radiance of magic arrays, causing the entire hall to be bathed in dim light. In addition, most of the people in the Blue Dragon Society were wearing black clothes, black conical hats, and masks, making this place seem even more evil than a gathering of the demonic path. Not only were the leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions present, but there were also some gold medal assassins from the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, such as Han Lei and Song Shao. In total, there were close to 100 people. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely heavy. Not a single person spoke. The assassins of the Blue Dragon Society didn't only have cold and silent people like Han Lei, but also talkative people like Song Shao. However, at this time, not a single person in the hall made a sound. Obviously, these people also noticed that this gathering was different from the usual ones. A moment later, Butian-nan walked out with the other 6 dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. Duanmu Qianshan followed behind Butian-nan expressionlessly. No one knew what he was thinking. Greetings, Big Dragon Head. Everyone present called out in unison. Butian-nan sat upright on the green dragon throne at the very top. He casually waved his hand and said, "It's like this every time. It's boring. If you have something to say, just say it." As usual, the branch leader who completes the least number of missions will be punished. Upon hearing this, everyone's expression changed. This wasn't an idea that Duanmu Qianshan came up with. Rather, it was something that Butian-nan had come up with several years ago. It was a so-called whip method. Every time there was a meeting, the branch leader who completed the least number of missions would be chosen to receive punishment. Moreover, the punishment was extremely cruel. They would have to endure the bites of several types of poisonous snakes from the Miao territory. They couldn't use their stellar energy to resist the bites, and they would only be given the antidote after an hour. With such a heavy threat present, the leaders of the Blue Dragon Society were indeed crazy to carry out the missions. However, in Duanmu Qianshan's eyes, this method was superfluous. It might even cause some negative effects. One had to know that the Blue Dragon Society itself was already the #1 assassin organization in the world. Business came to them of their own accord. They didn't lack missions at all. They only lacked people to complete the missions. Now that this rule was out, it was bound to cause the leaders of the various branches to be impatient for success. This would result in the loss of the assassins under them. They might even take on some less valuable missions to make up for the numbers and lower the standard of the Blue Dragon Society. At this time, Duanmu Qianshan stood up and said in a deep voice, "Big Dragon Head, I think that this is somewhat inappropriate. This rule should be abolished." Chapter 862. Duanmu Qianshan's sudden words made Bu Tiannan's face darken. Bu Tiannan really wanted to spare Duanmu Qianshan's life. Bu Tiannan was crazy, but that didn't mean he was an idiot. He knew how powerful Duanmu Qianshan was in the Blue Dragon Society. So if he really killed Duanmu Qianshan, it would definitely cause a lot of people in the Blue Dragon Society to oppose it, even to the point of dissension. However, there was a prerequisite for this. Duanmu Qianshan had to play dead and not provoke him. Bu Tiannan stood up abruptly and stared at Duanmu Qianshan. He said coldly, "Inappropriate? But I think it's appropriate." Duan Tianlang immediately stood up and shouted, "How dare you? Presumptuous! Duanmu Qianshan, how dare you speak to the Great Dragon Head like this?" Seeing that Duanmu Qianshan actually jumped out to cause trouble, Duan Tianlang was even a little excited. In the entire Blue Dragon Society, Duan Tianlang wasn't afraid of anyone. The one he feared the most was the old man, Duanmu Qianshan. Duanmu Qianshan's seniority was too great, and his contributions to the Blue Dragon Society were too great. Even Bu Tiannan was afraid of his prestige. So as long as Duanmu Qianshan was alive, no matter how much Bu Tiannan valued him, the position of the second dragon head would never belong to him. On the contrary, as long as Duanmu Qianshan was dead and Bu Tiannan agreed to let him be the second dragon head, the other dragon heads wouldn't be able to stop him. Duanmu Qianshan didn't bother with Duan Tianlang at all. He just looked at Bu Tiannan and said in a deep voice, "Great Dragon Head, I know you want to kill me, and I also know that you've disliked this old man for a long time. But before that, do you want to hear a few words from this old man?" The other dragon heads and the branch leaders of the 36 Big Dipper divisions were all silent. They looked at the two above in shock. Previously, they had only fallen out, but now, they had completely fallen out. Bu Tiannan looked at Duanmu Qianshan and said coldly, "Speak." Duanmu Qianshan sighed and said, "From the previous generation of the Blue Dragon Society, only you and I are left. You should still remember what the previous generation of the Blue Dragon Society was like. At that time, the 7 great dragon heads were ranked according to seniority, and strength was not the most important. The 7 of them were each responsible for a part of things, and they discussed with each other to check and balance each other. However, I felt that this would make the entire Blue Dragon Society's headquarters incredibly overstaffed. Only a single person would be able to maximize the efficiency of the Blue Dragon Society. However, that person isn't me. Although I have enough experience, my strength isn't enough to suppress others. Therefore, I'll let you have the position of Great Dragon Head. Only your strength can suppress the entire Blue Dragon Society." Bu Tiannan said expressionlessly, "So what you're saying is that my position as the Great Dragon Head of the Blue Dragon Society was given to me by you, and now, you're going to take it back?" Duanmu Qianshan closed his eyes and said, "No, I don't have the strength to take it back, nor do I have the qualifications to take it back." At this point, Duanmu Qianshan suddenly opened his eyes and said loudly, "I just want to ask you, Great Dragon Head. After all these years, have I ever had the slightest intention of rebelling?" Everything I've done is for the sake of the Blue Dragon Society. In the end, Great Dragon Head, you acted recklessly and didn't listen to my advice, causing the Blue Dragon Society to be stained with karma. Don't you know why the Heavenly Sin branch was destroyed 2 days ago, Great Dragon Head? In the end, you even went to the Temple of Great Light to seek revenge, which caused even deeper karma. Great Dragon Head, I still remember that when you first took over the Blue Dragon Society, although you had a strange personality, you weren't like this at that time. Bu Tiannan said with a gloomy expression, you ask me why I'm like this, then I'll tell you why. Because I'm the Great Dragon Head of the Blue Dragon Society. Whether the Blue Dragon Society is good or bad, it's my business alone. I'll bear the karma I've sown, I'll solve it. As long as I'm here, I won't let anything happen to the Blue Dragon Society. But I can't tolerate someone speaking louder than me in the Blue Dragon Society. Wuxia Xianxia smiled bitterly. He understood, he understood. It should be said that he was wrong from the beginning. Bu Tiannan was an extremely egoistic person, and he always had been. When Bu Tiannan was an assassin, it wasn't that no one told him to use some tactics to carry out his mission more easily and effortlessly. But Bu Tiannan never did it. Because this was someone else's method, when did he, Bu Tiannan, need anyone to teach him how to do things? It was the same now that he was the Great Dragon Head. Whether his actions were good or bad, when did he need Wuxia Xianxia to tell him what to do? Even if what he did was wrong, he had to be wrong to the end. A person who was very persistent in certain areas had the potential to become strong, and Bu Tiannan was such a person. But obviously, for the Blue Dragon Society, this wasn't a good thing. Wuxia Xianxia let out a long sigh. Great Dragon Head, you didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do anything wrong either. The entire Blue Dragon Society didn't do anything wrong either. It's just that you forgot one thing, and that is, the Blue Dragon Society doesn't belong to you alone, but to everyone in the Blue Dragon Society. Bu Tiannan said indifferently, are you done? If you are, then find a way to die in a dignified manner. I'll give you a chance to choose. When the crowd heard this, their expressions changed. Everyone knew what Wuxia Xianxia had done for the Blue Dragon Society over the years. Most of the people present were even promoted by Wuxia Xianxia. Wuxia Xianxia didn't promote these people because of their relationships, but because of their strength. If Wuxia Xianxia died, the Blue Dragon Society wouldn't just lose an existence at the True Fire Spirit Refinement realm, they would also lose their brains. Bu Tiannan valued people like Duan Tianlang. In fact, Duan Tianlang used to be the leader of the Big Dipper 36 divisions. Everyone knew who he was. What right did he have to replace Wuxia Xianxia? Therefore, everyone present spoke up, telling Bu Tiannan to calm down and wait. All of you, shut up. A powerful murderous intent suddenly bloomed, causing the entire hall to instantly become silent. However, at this moment, a figure in blood-red clothes calmly walked out from the murderous intent. As he walked, he said indifferently, Bu Tiannan, you are a top-notch assassin and a top-notch warrior, but you are not suitable to be the leader of the Blue Dragon Society. Senior Duanmu is right. The Blue Dragon Society isn't just your Blue Dragon Society. If you can't do this position well, then replace it with someone else. Everyone present turned their eyes to Chu Xiu. Bu Tiannan frowned and said coldly, who are you? Wuxia Xianxia trained you just to send you to your death. He could clearly feel that the person in front of him was only at the real pellet state, but his whole body gave Bu Tiannan an extremely uncomfortable feeling. There was even a hint of familiarity. Who am I? I'm a debt collector. Bu Tiannan, didn't you say that you will solve and bear the karma you sowed? Then now, let's settle the karma between you and me. As Chu Xiu took off the mask on his face, everyone present took a deep breath. Although more than half a year had passed, as a figure who had stirred up the underworld, who didn't recognize Chu Xiu? However, there were several dragon heads present who were very calm. Obviously, they had already known the news long ago. They were all people who would clearly stand on Wuxia Xianxia's side. Bu Tiannan looked at Chu Xiu in front of him. Even with his mental fortitude, he couldn't help but feel horrified at this time. Chu Xiu, you're not dead. Although resurrection sounded a little incredible, there were still some secret methods in the underworld that could do it. However, even if it could be done, the conditions were very harsh, and some things must be preserved. However, Bu Tiannan saw the power of that battle with his own eyes. He directly unleashed the power of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Everything was completely destroyed. Jingchan Jizang and Chu Xiu were already dead without any residue left. How did he resurrect? Of course, now was not the time to worry about this. Bu Tiannan turned his gaze to Wuxia Xianxia, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Wuxia Xianxia. You actually colluded with outsiders to kill me. Wuxia Xianxia said lightly, Sir Chu Xiu is not an outsider. He was originally from my Blue Dragon Society. But it was precisely because of Big Dragon Head's decision that the headquarters neglected the management of the Big Dipper 36 divisions, allowing a despicable person like Duan Tianlang to bully and curry favor with the superior, forcing Lord Chu Xiu to leave, forcing away the number one person of the younger generation. Big Dragon Head, you have done too many wrong things. I don't want to kill you, but for the sake of the Blue Dragon Society, I have to kill you. As soon as Wuxia Xianxia's voice fell, the entire Azure Dragon Society's main hall was enveloped in brilliant light. Dragons' roars reverberated in the air as the doors to the main hall were sealed shut, trapping everyone inside. Bu Tiannan looked at Duan Tianlang fiercely. What's going on? Something like the sect's protective array must be in the hands of one's confidants. In the past, the key to the sect's protective array was held by Wuxia Xianxia, but now it was taken away by Bu Tiannan and given to Duan Tianlang. Duan Tianlang said with a flustered face, I don't know either. The key is in my hands. Without the key, how did they activate the array? Wuxia Xianxia said lightly, how many years have you been in charge of the affairs of the Blue Dragon Society? I have been in charge for my whole life. Who said that the sect's protective array can't be activated without the array? Bu Tiannan turned his gaze to the remaining 4 dragon heads. These 4 people were the top killers of the real pellet state. In the Blue Dragon Society, their status was second only to Wuxia Xianxia and Bu Tiannan. Are you all going to betray me too? Among the 4, 3 of them stood firmly beside Wuxia Xianxia. Only one person was at a loss and seemed to have not recovered from this shock. One of them sighed and said, Big Dragon Head, it's not that we want to betray you, but if the Blue Dragon Society continues to develop like this, something big will happen sooner or later. After all, we are also members of the Blue Dragon Society. I really can't bear to see the Blue Dragon Society collapse like this. Bu Tiannan sneered, looked around, and said coldly, inescapable net, ambushes from 10 sides, so many preparations. It seems that you really intend to kill me today? Chu Xiu, you can kill the old monk Jingchan Jizang, do you think you can continue to kill me now? As Bu Tiannan's voice fell, the murderous intent around him suddenly erupted, and there was a faint roar of the Azure Dragon. Chapter 863. Just as Bu Tiannan had said to Duan Tianlang, he knew that Wuxia Xianxia would probably stir up some trouble and would not give up without putting up a fight. Although Chu Xiu's appearance was beyond his expectation, Bu Tiannan was not afraid. For Bu Tiannan, his way of dealing with things had always been simple and violent. No matter what kind of conspiracy they were, he would kill them all and be quiet. Dense killing intent condensed like a substance. Bu Tiannan suddenly clawed at Wuxia Xianxia, who was the closest to him. A sonic boom came in the air. The cyan dragon claw was vivid and lifelike. In an instant, it had locked all the places around Wuxia Xianxia to dodge. Although Wuxia Xianxia was old, he still had the strength to fight. A gilded dragon staff appeared in his hand and he smashed it at Butiannan's claw. With a loud bang, an extreme wave broke out, causing the surrounding people to dodge in a hurry. Chu Xiu also did not expect that Wuxia Xianxia, an old man who looked gentle and refined, would have such a firm and fierce martial path. Especially those who chose to use a staff as a weapon, their martial arts were big and fierce. It seemed that when Wuxia Xianxia was young, he was also very violent. After just one move, Wuxia Xianxia was directly blown away by Butiannan. His hand holding the gilded dragon staff began to tremble slightly. Wuxia Xianxia smiled bitterly. He was old and had not fought for many years. His current strength was not even half of his peak. In other words, even when he was at his peak, he was no match for Butiannan. This was also the reason why he gave the position of chief dragon to Butiannan even though he had more experience and prestige than Butiannan. It was because he believed that Butiannan's strength could bring enough benefits to the Azure Dragon Society. Unexpectedly, he did not see any benefits, but trouble kept coming. As Butiannan made his move, Chu Xiu also took a step forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Butiannan and punched him. His momentum was like a raging river and the rising fist intent pressed forward. Mountain and sea fist scripture. Butiannan turned around and also punched. The killing intent was so strong that it almost overflowed. It was like a sharp blade, tearing everything apart. The two fists collided, and the power of both exploded. The entire hall was filled with the brilliance of the array. Obviously, the power of these two people had threatened the array in the hall of the Blue Dragon Society. Originally, Butiannan thought that no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he was only at the real pellet state, and fighting head-on was purely courting death. However, who would have thought that this punch would cause both sides to take several steps back? In terms of pure strength, the two sides were actually evenly matched. Looking at the thin layer of golden and silver flames around Chu Xiu's body, Butiannan narrowed his eyes and said, "Refining your body with true fire? You took the same path as Qinqing Di." After the end of the 6 illusory realms, apart from the matter of Chu Xiu and Jingchan Jizong perishing together, Emperor Qinqing also shocked the pugilistic world. Of course, after that, some people also tried to use internal power and true fire to refine their bodies, but they found that it was useless. Of course, after that, there were also people who tried to temper their bodies with inner force and true fire. However, they found that it was useless. Of course, after that, some people tried to refine their bodies with internal power and true fire, but they finally found that it was useless. Refining one's body with true fire was different from refining one's spirit. The latter only required one to accumulate one's comprehension of heaven and earth and could be completed in a short period of time. The former, on the other hand, required a long period of time to use the true fire to temper the body, all the way until every strand of flesh and every meridian in the body was like a divine weapon. This kind of pain needed to be endured for more than 10 years or even decades. It was not something that ordinary people could endure at all. Besides, even if you could endure it, could you accurately control the true fire to refine every strand of flesh and blood in your body in this kind of pain? Once something went wrong, you would be hurt. And even if you could do both, in a few decades, people with good perception would have already stepped into the realm of true fire and spirit refinement. Why bother to take such a difficult path? So in the current Jianghu, only Qinqing Di was taking this path. Only Chu Xiu took advantage of the opportunity of reconstructing his body to complete the journey that others would take decades to complete in a short period of time. Butiannan was surprised that Chu Xiu could reach this step, but then he sneered and said, "So what if you have refined your body with true fire? If Qinqing Di came in person, I might be afraid. But even if you have refined your body with true fire, you are not Qinqing Di." Behind Butiannan, a cyan light was flowing, and a powerful and majestic aura was like that of a fierce beast. A lifelike azure dragon Dharma power hovered behind him, as if the azure dragon, an ancient divine beast, had descended. The azure dragon materialization did not directly attack Chu Xiu and Wuxia Xianxia. Instead, it attached itself to Butiannan's body. In an instant, Butiannan's aura became extremely fierce. The cyan azure dragon Gang Qi condensed around his body, vaguely looking like a dragon's claws and tail. Even his eyes turned golden, like the pupils of a snake. Chu Xiu had seen this kind of change in Xianxia, the guy who refined the inner elixir of the blood dragon. What was going on with Butiannan? Wuxia Xianxia came over and whispered, "Be careful. Butiannan once obtained a drop of ancient azure dragon blood. Of course, no one can be sure whether it was the blood of the azure dragon or the blood of a powerful flood dragon. But this thing did cause some changes in his cultivation method with the Blue Dragon Society. Once he enters this state of dragon transformation, not only does his strength skyrocket, but his personality also becomes extremely crazy, bloodthirsty, and belligerent. I even suspect that this change in his personality has something to do with the blood of the azure dragon." As Wuxia Xianxia's voice fell, Butiannan had already rushed toward Chu Xiu and Wuxia Xianxia. With a casual grab, the cyan Gang Qi condensed into a lifelike green dragon crescent moon blade. The blade was the color of blood condensed from murderous intent. It had to be said that in this state, Butiannan's control of his power was almost condensed to the extreme. The ability to condense qi into something was generally possible for any warrior who could externalize Gang Qi. The only difference was how much you could do it. For example, if it was the same sword qi, the sword qi released by a warrior who had just reached the level of externalizing Gang Qi was not called sword qi at all. It could only be called a force. The stronger one's strength was, the more realistic and powerful the Gang Qi that could be condensed would be. On the green dragon crescent moon blade condensed by Butiannan, the Gang Qi had even condensed to an unimaginable level. When the blade fell, the space in front of him seemed to be torn apart by him. The Heavenly Law War Case appeared in Chu Xiu's hand. With a shake of his hand, the Heavenly Law War Case turned into a huge saber. The unique saber technique of the Black Tortoise True Technique was displayed. The power of the saber was unstoppable. However, when fighting with Butiannan, Chu Xiu was forced to retreat step by step. This was a complete suppression of power, and no saber technique could make up for it. Especially now that Butiannan had entered this state of dragon transformation. Although he had fallen into a certain degree of madness, and even the saber technique he used could not be called a saber technique, each of his moves had reached the limit of his own combat strength. He had exerted his strength to the extreme and accurately chopped at the weakest part of each of Chu Xiu's saber techniques. Butiannan could be said to be the strongest existence that Chu Xiu had encountered so far. The strength of the top 10 on the list was not just for show, but for killing. Although the old monk Jingchan Jizang was also very strong, he could not compare with Butiannan. The difference in power between the two was like heaven and earth. Wuxia Xianxia took advantage of the time when Butiannan was madly attacking Chu Xiu. The golden coiling dragon staff in his hand blossomed with an extremely dazzling radiance. It was as if the sun was falling down with a loud bang. Wuxia Xianxia had stimulated his current strength to the peak of this strike, which was not much different from when he was young. However, Butiannan's figure moved. The divine dragon tail whip, and the cyan dragon tail made of Gang Qi instantly grew to more than 10 meters. It directly whipped Wuxia Xianxia and his staff away. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chu Xiu slashed out with the sea-cleaving blade in his hand. The blade momentum was like a raging wave, tearing everything in front of it apart. The powerful blade momentum even seemed to have completely divided the hall, causing the other disciples of the Blue Dragon Society to immediately dodge to the side. The power of the sea-cleaving blade seemed to have exerted Chu Xiu's current strength to the extreme. As the blade slashed down, Butiannan's figure was blasted back a few steps. His crescent blade, which was completely condensed from Azure Dragon Gang Chi, also showed traces of cracks. However, after this slash, Chu Xiu's hands that were holding the blade also trembled slightly. On the heavenly blade formed by the heavenly war case, some of the mechanisms were even a little shaken by the power of the recoil, making a metallic screech. Chu Xiu sighed. He finally understood what Mo Yezi meant when he said that the heavenly war case was flawed. No matter what kind of weapon it was or what kind of strange power it had, the most important thing about a weapon was that it had to be sturdy and sharp. It could withstand great power and cause enough damage. The heavenly war case was currently changing, but its power was insufficient. It was still at a disadvantage in this kind of head-on collision. However, Duanmu Qianshan's all-out attack had finally created an opportunity for him. Chu Xiu would not give up so easily. The heavenly war case in his hand transformed into a long spear. Ask the Heavens tyrannical spear. When the Ask the Heavens spear art was used, the spear momentum was like a forest, and its power was indomitable. It was even stronger than the Lu family's ancestor. In the blink of an eye, the Ask the Heavens tyrannical spear turned into the Great Change Halberd. The Black Tortoise True Technique's Great Change Halberd manual was used. Although it was a different concept from Lu Fengxian's Unparalleled Demon God Halberd, it was still a martial Dao that was open and open. After several consecutive changes of martial Dao, as long as Butian-nan adapted to this martial Dao and found its weakness, Chu Xiu would immediately change his martial Dao. This was the true use of the Black Tortoise True Technique. It would make the enemy never be able to find out where the boundaries of your martial Dao were. Chapter 864. Seeing Duanmu Qianshan and Chu Xiu joining hands to suppress Butian-nan, many warriors of the Blue Dragon Society present had different expressions, but most of them were happy to see Butian-nan die. As Duanmu Qianshan said before, most of the people in the Blue Dragon Society were promoted by him and were his confidants. Even if some of them were not, they were not blind. They knew who was doing things that were beneficial to the Blue Dragon Society, and they also knew who was destroying the foundation of the Blue Dragon Society. However, Duan Tianlang was extremely nervous at this time. Butian-nan's defeat was equivalent to his own death. However, at this time, the situation on the field suddenly changed. Butian-nan was suppressed to the extreme by Chu Xiu's Black Tortoise True Technique. His eyes suddenly burst out a bloody light. His dragon body was stained with blood, and the surrounding energy instantly erupted several times. The green dragon crescent blade slashed horizontally, and the violent power drowned everything. No matter what martial arts technique Chu Xiu used, it was completely submerged by the violent power in the sky. The natural law war case in Chu Xiu's hand once again transformed into the peerless heavenly blade. As the blade slashed down, the red dust slash was displayed. The space was like a scroll, and everything was torn apart by Chu Xiu's red dust slash. However, after the scroll was torn, an even more violent blade light rushed toward Butian-nan. Only God knew how powerful Butian-nan was now. It seemed to be endless. On the other side, Duanmu Qianshan also wanted to help Butian-nan, but after all, he was already old and could not exert his full strength for a long time. Almost as soon as he got close to Butian-nan, he was blasted away. Chu Xiu desperately resisted, but at this time, Lu Jianghu suddenly said, "Boy, there is something wrong with this guy. Look at his hand. Try to get close to him with the blood shadow technique and see where he came from." Previously, Chu Xiu's attention was focused on resisting Butian-nan's attack, so he did not pay attention to anything else. Only after hearing Lu Jianghu's words did he notice the other party's hand. It was impossible to say that Butian-nan was not affected at all by Chu Xiu's mortal world ethereal cut. At this moment, the web between his thumb and forefinger had already been torn, but what seeped out wasn't scarlet blood, but greenish-gold blood. This was a little strange. Chu Xiu had never seen anyone cultivate a cultivation technique that could change the color of their blood. Chu Xiu unleashed the mountainous sea fist scripture. Amidst the endless storm of saber lights, even with the toughness of Chu Xiu's fleshly body, his arms were still sliced until they were drenched in blood. However, with the undying demon pill, those injuries could be healed almost instantly. Of course, this immortality was limited. Previously, on the battlefield between the Lu family and the Sun family, because there was an innumerable amount of blood and qi as nourishment to repair Chu Xiu's body, he was almost immortal at that time. But now, there was no such condition. In order to maintain his immortality, Chu Xiu had to consume his own strength. If he was injured too much, he would not be able to withstand it. Just as Chu Xiu approached Butiannan, Chu Xiu displayed the blood shadow technique. In an instant, countless blood shadows bloomed. Although most of them were completely smashed into blood mist by Butiannan's casual attack, there were still a few blood shadows that approached Butiannan. In an instant, Chu Xiu displayed the blood god demonic technique and absorbed a drop of Butiannan's blood. The blood god demonic technique had reached the pinnacle of control over one's own blood and qi, and it was the same for anyone's blood and qi. After absorbing a drop of blood, Chu Xiu understood what was going on with Butiannan. No wonder everyone in Jianghu called him a madman. No wonder Su Yun did not kill Butiannan when he went to the Great Light Temple last time, even though Butiannan was much stronger than Su Yun. The fundamental reason was that they were afraid of driving Butiannan crazy and creating a real evil monster. On the path of martial arts, there were many who relied on external items. Even the elixirs and other things that everyone used for their daily cultivation were considered external items. However, everyone was extremely cautious when it came to these powers that were not cultivated by themselves. Like Wuxia Xianxia, who swallowed and refined the inner core of the blood dragon to cultivate the demonic beast cultivation method, this was already considered extremely bold. But Butiannan was different. What he did could not be considered bold, but simply crazy. In the past, he did not refine that drop of azure dragon blood. Instead, he fused with it, traced it back to its source, and let that drop of azure dragon blood assimilate himself. Simply put, Butiannan actually wanted to use that drop of azure dragon blood to transform himself into a real azure dragon body. This kind of thing, not to mention actually doing it, even thinking about it felt like a fantasy. But Butiannan did it. Although he did not succeed, he did not fail. Now, part of his blood, even his meridians and bones, had even been transformed into the appearance of a ferocious beast. The power of a ferocious beast came from its own world, and its strength was definitely far greater than that of a human warrior. This kind of assimilation had already been ingrained in Butiannan's bones. Although it would not appear in normal times, if he used all his strength like now, the ferocity and madness of the ferocious beast would completely take over him. At that time, Butiannan would really become a monster, an uncontrollable monster. Chu Xiu believed that Butiannan should also know all this, but he still chose to cultivate like this. This guy was really a madman who would go all the way to the end. At this time, Lu Jiang he could not help but say, "Boy, if you can't do it, just retreat for the time being. It is really tricky to meet such a madman. This guy does not even care about his own life, how can you fight with him? Why can't I fight? If he dares to risk his life, so do I." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he did not retreat, but instead moved forward. He displayed the black tortoise divine palm of the black tortoise true technique. The powerful force was like a mountain, blocking Butiannan's attack. Although it could not completely block it, with the eternal demon pill, if he could not block it, he could resist it. At the same time, a large amount of blood mist burst out from Chu Xiu's body, wrapping around Butiannan. This blood mist was not used to attack. Even if Butiannan casually tore a large piece of it, this blood mist was still constantly pulling the power of Butiannan's blood. The control of the demonic blood method on the power of Butiannan's blood was extremely subtle. Chu Xiu was using his own blood to pull the power of Butiannan's blood. At present, the power of Butiannan's blood had been divided into two parts, one belonged to him, and the other belonged to the blood of the Azure Dragon. Although the two sides had merged a little, in fact, they had not completely merged. In fact, even Butiannan himself did not know whether these two kinds of blood could completely merge. Therefore, under the pull of the demonic blood method, Butiannan suddenly let out a muffled groan. A fierce light flashed in his eyes, and his attacks became more violent. At this time, Chu Xiu did not care, as if he really wanted to fight Butiannan to the end. The blood mist had become so thick that it condensed into a huge blood cocoon. Every time it pulsed, Butiannan's blood was pulled out. At this time, Chu Xiu's face was as pale as a piece of paper. The eternal demon pill could not withstand such a long period of consumption, and at the same time, the demonic blood method also extracted the power of his blood. Right now, he was completely fighting with Butiannan to see who would be the first to give up. At this moment, Wuxia Xianxia's figure appeared behind Butiannan. All the power in his body flowed into the gilded coiling dragon staff. The staff smashed down with the force of a mountain, and the entire surface of the gilded coiling dragon staff cracked. With a loud bang, the gang energy defense around Butiannan was smashed. Butiannan himself, along with the already cracked gilded coiling dragon staff, were directly sent flying. Wuxia Xianxia's concentrated attack finally caused a chain reaction. A stream of blood flowed from the corner of Butiannan's mouth. It was no longer green-gold blood, but bright red. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the huge blood cocoon suddenly exploded, and a large amount of blood gushed out of Butiannan's body. At the same time, the cyan gang qi around him quickly dissipated, the azure dragon dharma form also gradually collapsed, and even his eyes gradually returned to normal. The heavenly law war case in Chu Xiu's hand instantly transformed into the heavenly seeking tyrannical spear, and directly pierced towards Butiannan. With a loud bang, the spear pierced through his chest and nailed him to the stone wall. However, at the same time that Chu Xiu made his move, Butiannan's right hand condensed the last trace of power, turned it into a dragon claw, and directly pierced through Chu Xiu's chest. Seeing this scene, Mu Zi suddenly cried out in surprise. Regardless of anything else, she was about to rush forward, but she was firmly held back by Han Lei and Song Shao. Although the fight between the two of them seemed to have ended, the slightest fluctuation could cost their lives. Miss. Calm down. Official Chu will not die so easily. Don't forget that Official Chu's body was destroyed, but he is still alive. Sure enough, Chu Xiu, whose face was as pale as a piece of paper, pulled Butiannan's hand out of his chest. Although a large amount of blood was spurting out and Chu Xiu couldn't even stand steadily, there was a force protecting his heart meridian, allowing his body to slowly heal. Butiannan did not have the invincible demon pill, so he would definitely die. However, perhaps because of the demonic beast's blood, Butiannan's vitality was unusually strong. Even though his heart meridian was pierced by Chu Xiu's spear, he still did not die completely. Looking at Chu Xiu, Butiannan suddenly laughed. Every time he laughed, a large amount of blood gushed out of his mouth. Chu Xiu, although you killed me, you did not win. Butiannan was right. Chu Xiu did kill Butiannan, but if Wuxia Xianxia did not give Chu Xiu a chance at the last moment, the result of the battle would still be unknown. In a real battle of life and death, Chu Xiu indeed could not win against Butiannan. But I don't need to win, I only need to kill you, even if I have to do it by hook or by crook. Although Butiannan was on the verge of death, his expression and tone did not show any fear of death, nor did he show any hatred or anger towards Chu Xiu. Regardless of whether I win or lose, I only see defeat. Ha ha ha. Chu Xiu, you are shameless enough. You are more suitable for this Jianghu than I am. The Blue Dragon Society may be better in your hands than in mine, but it may also be more miserable. But I did not lose, and I did not do anything wrong. After saying the last sentence, a drop of greenish-golden blood completely exploded in Butiannan's body, and at the same time, his vitality was taken away. Chapter 865. Butiannan was the only one among all the people that Chu Xiu had killed who he didn't hate, but he had to kill. The one that Chu Xiu really wanted to kill was actually Duan Tianlang, the villain who had schemed against him. However, just because of Duan Tianlang, Chu Xiu wanted to fight with Butiannan to the death, which was actually very funny. Just as Butiannan said before he died, he didn't lose, and he didn't do anything wrong. He was an extremely stubborn person. Even before he died, he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. In Butiannan's mind, there was no detour, no room for euphemism. There was only one way to go, and that was to go all the way to death. He accepted the task to kill people, so anyone who stood in his way must die. He became the head of the great dragon. No matter whether his decision was right or wrong, he would not allow anyone to refute or interfere, even if that person's decision was actually right. Duan Tianlang had become his subordinate. Even though he knew that Duan Tianlang was a bully and wasn't a good person, he would never allow Chu Xiu to kill him since he was his subordinate. It was difficult to judge a person based on right or wrong, success or failure. It could only be said that Butiannan was really stubborn to the extreme. Even if he didn't die in the hands of Chu Xiu, with his character, once he provoked the most powerful person in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he would definitely be killed. Butiannan was right about one thing. Chu Xiu was more shameless than him, and he was more suitable for this Jianghu. Most of the time, to survive in this Jianghu, it was not only about who was stronger, but also about who was more shameless. At this moment, Duan Tianlang, who was standing on the side, was already sweating, and his eyes were full of fear. Butiannan was dead. Butiannan, who was ranked in the top 10 on the list, was killed by Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu was alive, he had nightmares almost every day, fearing that Chu Xiu would kill him. It wasn't until Chu Xiu's death that he finally had a few days of peace. He didn't have to worry about being killed all the time. But when Chu Xiu revealed his identity just now, he still couldn't believe that Chu Xiu was still alive. How could he still be alive? Regardless of whether Duan Tianlang believed it or not, Chu Xiu had appeared in front of him. Moreover, Duan Tianlang knew that as Butiannan's confidant, he knew exactly what he had been doing recently. Bullying the weak and sucking up to the strong could even be considered a good thing. He had been wantonly eliminating dissidents in the Blue Dragon Society and fighting for power. He had offended more than just one or two people. Without Butiannan's protection, even without Chu Xiu's help, he would still be dead. At this moment, the outer array formation seemed to loosen a little, and the door opened once again. In an instant, a blood mist erupted around Duan Tianlang. He was extremely decisive and immediately chose to burn his blood essence to escape. However, just as he was about to escape, a crimson figure suddenly appeared beside him and brought him to Chu Xiu's side. Chu Xiu's face was still pale, and his body was even on the verge of collapse. He strangled Duan Tianlang's neck, but his hand was like an iron fist. No matter how much true qi Duan Tianlang burst out of his body, he couldn't break free. Duan Tianlang still wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu wouldn't give him the chance to speak. The next moment, Chu Xiu exerted force and broke Duan Tianlang's neck. Even before dying, Duan Tianlang's eyes showed a trace of relief. In his nightmares, this was not the first time this scene had appeared. Seeing that Chu Xiu's body was shaking slightly, Mu Zi immediately rushed up to support Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu gently waved his hand. With the undying demon pill, he didn't need to worry about his injuries. As long as he had the strength to repair them, they would recover sooner or later. Chu Xiu looked at Duanmu Qianshan. Duanmu Qianshan also sighed and said, "Kill." As soon as his voice fell, some of the martial artists present suddenly made their moves and began to massacre the martial artists of the Azure Dragon Society wantonly. Although Bu Tiannan was now dead, no one could guarantee that they didn't want to surrender. The struggle for power was cold-blooded and heartless. As long as you stood on the wrong side, there were only two outcomes. Go to heaven and be rich, or go to hell and be reincarnated. Wuxia Xianxia glanced at the dragon head that had chosen to remain neutral. The dragon head suddenly trembled and hurriedly said, "Second dragon head, although I didn't say anything before, I also couldn't stand Bu Tiannan's way of doing things. However, everyone knows Bu Tiannan's personality. Even if I say something, he won't listen." Wuxia Xianxia said indifferently, "For now, put down your identity as the fourth dragon head. We'll talk about it later." The current situation was sensitive. Wuxia Xianxia wouldn't let an indecisive person continue to be one of the 7 dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. The fourth dragon head sighed and took off his mask and bamboo hat. He stood to the side and waited for his punishment. He also knew that Wuxia Xianxia was being merciful by sparing his life at this time. Just when everyone thought that Wuxia Xianxia was going to announce that from today onward, he pointed at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "From today onward, Lord Chu Xiu is the new great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society." Apart from those who already knew the news and were Wuxia Xianxia's confidants, the others were in an uproar and started discussing. It wasn't that they wanted to oppose Chu Xiu, but this matter came too suddenly. They naturally wouldn't oppose Wuxia Xianxia becoming the great dragon head. After all, this position originally belonged to Wuxia Xianxia. Moreover, they had seen Wuxia Xianxia's contributions to the Blue Dragon Society over the years. However, to put it bluntly, Chu Xiu was still an outsider. Although he was from the Blue Dragon Society and had killed the Longevity Sword sect before, everyone was still somewhat against it. Wuxia Xianxia sighed and shook his head. "I know that this news is hard for everyone to accept for now. However, apart from Lord Chu Xiu, who else is qualified to be the Great Dragon Head? In terms of status, Lord Chu Xiu was originally from the Blue Dragon Society. If it weren't for some despicable people secretly stirring up trouble, Lord Chu Xiu would be one of the 7 great dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. In terms of strength, everyone has seen that Lord Chu Xiu just killed Bu Tiannan. Is that not enough?" Seeing that everyone wanted to say something, Wuxia Xianxia immediately waved his hand and said, "I know what everyone wants to say. What you want to say is that I can also be the great dragon head." Wuxia Xianxia smiled bitterly and pointed at himself. "Everyone still hasn't seen my current state. I'm already old and can't fight anymore. In a battle between people of the same realm, I can only sneak attack from the side. If I fight head-on, how can I compete with the elites on the reputation list? I don't have the qualifications. Only official Chu does. That battle just now consumed at least a few years of my lifespan. If everyone really cares about this old man, then hurry up and let official Chu take the position so that I can rest in peace for a period of time." Hearing Wuxia Xianxia's words, everyone present lowered their heads and saluted. "Greetings, Great Dragon Head." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Get up, there's no need to be so polite. Actually, I know that most of you still have doubts about me. However, it doesn't matter. Anyone who follows me, Chu Xiu, will never regret it." Chu Xiu said briefly. He glanced at Bu Tiannan's corpse and asked, "Is there a place in the Blue Dragon Society where the heads of past generations are buried?" Wuxia Xianxia hesitated for a moment before saying, "Yes, there is. The Blue Dragon Society has an independent space that was opened up by the 4 Elements sect in the past. It's not too big and can't fit many things. Therefore, it's used to bury the heads of past generations of Blue Dragon Society." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Bury Bu Tiannan there as well. If he doesn't take the position of Great Dragon Head, he will definitely be a sharp sword for the Blue Dragon Society." Today's situation is only because the Blue Dragon Society put someone who isn't suitable in this position. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, everyone present had a better impression of him. Regardless of whether Chu Xiu was buying people's hearts by doing this, at least they didn't have to worry about things like settling accounts in the future if they followed a broad-minded person. At this time, Song Xiao looked at Duan Tianlang's corpse on the ground and asked, "Chu, no, Great Dragon Head, what should we do with this guy?" Chu Xiu glanced at the corpse and said, "Chop him up and throw him out to feed the dogs." Song Xiao, Bu Tiannan was dead, so Chu Xiu had successfully taken over the position of Great Dragon Head. However, there were still a bunch of loose ends that needed to be dealt with. Fortunately, Duanmu Qianshan was here, so Chu Xiu threw all of these to Duanmu Qianshan. It wasn't that Chu Xiu believed in Duanmu Qianshan, but he knew that Duanmu Qianshan had no other choice but to assist him wholeheartedly. Duanmu Qianshan was already so old. After killing Bu Tiannan, he welcomed Chu Xiu. If he didn't help Chu Xiu manage the Blue Dragon Society well, where would he find someone strong enough to take over the Blue Dragon Society? Therefore, Duanmu Qianshan was also gambling. He was gambling that Chu Xiu was strong now and would become even stronger in the future. He was so strong that he could ignore the karma of any strong enemy. Ever since the war between the righteous and demonic paths 500 years ago, the pugilistic world had been peaceful for 500 years. However, when had the pugilistic world ever been peaceful? Duanmu Qianshan saw it very clearly. In the chaotic times of the pugilistic world, you either had to be strong enough, or you had to find someone strong enough to rely on. In any case, he had placed all his bets on Chu Xiu. As for victory or defeat, it was all up to fate. From that day on, Duanmu Qianshan began to deal with these things and temporarily closed the Blue Dragon Society. He warned those who saw Chu Xiu to keep Chu Xiu's identity a secret, and began to re-establish various rules and so on. Chu Xiu also began to peacefully recuperate in the Blue Dragon Society in seclusion. Originally, when killing the Lu family's ancestor and the Sun family's ancestor, Chu Xiu was still a little unaccustomed to his own strength. This was because the Sun family's ancestor and the Lu family's ancestor were relatively weak among the true fire spirit refinement realm experts that Chu Xiu had fought before. The Sun family's ancestor was at the same level as Fang Jinwu. The Lu family's ancestor was slightly stronger, but he was only slightly stronger after going all out. Opponents at this level could no longer temper Chu Xiu's strength. However, fighting with Bu Tiannan, who was in the top 10 of the list, benefited Chu Xiu a lot. Chapter 866. While Chu Xiu was in seclusion, the Jianghu was in an uproar. The Blue Dragon Society released the news that Bu Tiannan had died in the Blue Dragon Society's infighting, and the new big dragon head was Lin Shui, who had successfully killed Bu Tiannan. No one doubted that this news was fake, because it was released by the Blue Dragon Society's 36 Big Dipper divisions at the same time. Unless the entire Blue Dragon Society was playing this kind of silly joke on the Jianghu. However, what they couldn't accept was that Lin Shui was in the top 10 of the Wind Cloud list, a powerhouse who could stir up the Jianghu. How could he die so easily? The wind-sweeping tower was the craziest. According to the rules, Lin Shui had killed Bu Tiannan, so he should naturally take his place and become the 7th on the Wind Cloud list. However, the problem was, how should they write the information? The information of the other powerhouses on the Wind Cloud list was piled up like a mountain. If it was more detailed, it could be written into several books. However, when it came to Lin Shui, there were only 2 records left. One was that he had destroyed the Longevity Sword sect, and the other was that he had killed Bu Tiannan. Everyone in the Jianghu knew about this. It was a shame for the wind-sweeping tower to have this kind of information. However, the crux of the matter was that Lin Shui seemed to have popped out from a crack in a rock, making it impossible for anyone to find out anything about him. However, since the Blue Dragon Society had changed to a new big dragon head, they had become much more low-key. They even began to give up some of the too simple tasks, which made the people in the Jianghu feel a lot more relaxed. The killers of the Blue Dragon Society were too unscrupulous before, and with the madman Butian-nan, some people were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. Now that Butian-nan was dead, the people of the Blue Dragon Society had calmed down a bit. No matter who Lin Shui was, he had done a good deed. At this time, inside the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu's body was still burning with layers of golden and silver true fire. Refining the body with true fire was a method that could not be stopped once it was used. For most people, this kind of pain was unbearable. Of course, Chu Xiu couldn't bear it either, so he had to endure it with all his might. Even if he forcibly blocked the pain with his mind power, it would still be useless. This was because the true fire body refinement method was mainly to refine one's own body. The composition of the human body was complex and closely connected. Every tiny meridian needed to be carefully refined. Once one lost their sense of pain, it was very easy for problems to occur. An hour later, Chu Xiu's inner force true fire extinguished. He stretched his neck and walked out of the seclusion chamber. It took almost a month for Chu Xiu to completely recover from the injuries he suffered from fighting with Butian-nan. There was Shan's essence, sword, and Shan, and Qi, Shan, Wu, demon, and Su, dragon, Chu, and Xiu, Shan, Ming sword, Wu, Shan. Shan, Wu, Ling spirit, King Ming spirit King Ming, Dan, Shan, Ming Chu began, spirit, Shan. Moreover, the more familiar Chu Xiu was with the power of the undying demon pill, the more shocked he was. The eternal demon elixir didn't have any great power, so even the people in the Yinma clan, Wei Shuya, who had the method to cultivate the eternal demon elixir, were not very familiar with the usage and true power of the eternal demon elixir. However, Chu Xiu, who had experienced rebirth, could sense the true power of the eternal demon pill. Everything in the world was born and destroyed, so true immortality was just a false proposition. However, the indestructible demon pill had found a balance between life and death. Only those who had truly died once would know how to truly be indestructible. Destruction and reconstruction. That was how it was. Dugu Weiwei was the one who invented the indestructible demon pill. Chu Xiu, with an indestructible demon pill that didn't even have a manual, was able to reconstruct his body and resurrect, let alone Dugu Weiwei. Most likely, right now, Dugu Weiwei was looking at him from some place. Was he trying to take over Dugu Weiwei's body, or was he Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation? The more Chu Xiu knew, the more confused he became. In any case, there was only one thing he could do now, and that was to increase his power and make himself stronger, so strong that he could deal with everything. After Chu Xiu walked out of the seclusion room, he casually strolled around the Blue Dragon Society. In fact, apart from gatherings, most of the time, the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society was quite empty. The quality of the assassins in the Blue Dragon Society was very high. Apart from a few people who had a few small hobbies, most of them only had 2 daily activities, training and carrying out missions. Chu Xiu originally wanted to find Duanwu Qianshan and ask if anything happened after the Blue Dragon Society changed the big dragon head. However, when he passed by the training field in the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, he saw Mu Zi practicing her saber there. Mu Zi's way of practicing the saber was very clumsy. In front of her was a puppet covered with arrays that could absorb energy. Mu Zi gathered all the energy in her body and slashed at the puppet. Then, she repeated the process, slashing again and again. Although this method seemed clumsy and monotonous, martial arts cultivation was like this. There were no shortcuts. On the contrary, those who practiced some fancy things in the early stages would not be able to go far. It was obvious that Mu Zi's method had been taught by someone who understood. After all, she had Duanwu Qianshan as her adoptive father. Although Wuxia Xianxia used a staff, martial arts was something like that. If one didn't know how to use it, wouldn't he know how to practice? When Mu Zi saw Chu Xiu appear, she immediately put away her saber, wiped the sweat on her forehead, and ran over. She said with surprise, "Young Master Chu, your injuries have healed?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Actually, it wasn't a big deal at the beginning." "Oh right, I remember that you used a sword at the beginning. Why are you using a saber now?" "Actually, women aren't good at using sabers. Saber arts focus on momentum, big movements, and advancing courageously. Although there are saber arts that focus on strange sharpness, it's difficult to achieve great Dao." Lu Jianghu, who was in the Blood Soul Pearl, slapped his head. He wanted to complain, but in the end, he couldn't even be bothered to say it. Chu Xiu was really hopeless. A lady came over to ask if his injuries were healed with concern, but he told her that he wasn't suitable to practice the saber. This kind of guy actually had so many beautiful women circling around him. It was simply illogical. Mu Zi smiled and said, "Actually, I liked using the saber from the beginning. However, my father said that women should use swords. Saber arts seem too fierce. Now that the Mu clan is gone, no one cares about me. Of course, I can use whatever I want." Adoptive father said the same thing as young Master Chu, but I don't feel that it's suitable. At my current realm, I can't feel anything like martial arts. I only know that my saber can kill, and that's enough. All I ask is that my saber can protect me and help me kill those who want to harm me. I'll be satisfied. At this point, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu and said softly, "Young Master Chu, Mu Zi is no longer the Mu Zi of the past. I can't even kill my enemies with my own hands. Other than self-protection, I practice the saber with all my might because I want to help the people I want to protect when they are in danger. Instead of crying in sorrow, I want to take my saber and fight for them to avenge them." Chu Xiu nodded and patted Mu Zi's shoulder. He said, "Not bad. It wasn't easy for you to walk out of that incident. In fact, with your current strength, you can completely stand shoulder to shoulder with the top few on the Longhu list." When Chu Xiu first met Mu Zi, he could tell that this girl's talent was not too good. After all, she came from a small clan. Talent and bloodline were indeed important. At least, the probability of a small clan producing a genius was far lower than a large clan like the Shangshuaying clan. But in these few years, Mu Zi relied on her own willpower to catch up. Even with Duanmu Qianshan's help, it was not easy for her. At this moment, Lu Jianghu, who was in the Blood Soul bead, wanted to bang his head against the wall if he was not tied to the bronze pillar. She has already said so much, but you don't hurry up and hug her to comfort her. Instead, you even patted her on the shoulder. Do you think she is like Tangya and Yen Bugui? Lu Jianghu endured for a long time. He resisted the urge to ridicule Chu Xiu. As the saying goes, when one is under the eaves, even the Devil Lord has to bow his head. Chu Xiu had already promised him that when Chu Xiu reached the peak of the true fire spirit refinement state, he would let him out. Therefore, Lu Jianghu was also trying his best to control his mouth and not offend Chu Xiu. Although this promise seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for Chu Xiu in the eyes of others, it was actually very sincere on Chu Xiu. Although Lu Jianghu did not follow Chu Xiu for a long time, he clearly saw Chu Xiu's various trump cards and the extent of his potential. The peak of the true fire spirit refinement state, even in the era of heroes 500 years ago, would be considered an expert. But with Chu Xiu's current potential, it was only a matter of time before he reached this state. In order to get out of this broken bead as soon as possible, Lu Jianghu could only try his best to control his mouth. However, with his talkative personality, if Chu Xiu did something worth ridiculing again, he could not guarantee that he would be able to control himself. Fortunately, someone else came over at this time. It was Luo Feiheng, who was brought to look for Chu Xiu by an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. Previously, Chu Xiu had given her the key to enter and exit the Blue Dragon Society. If anything happened, Luo Feiheng could come here to look for him. However, as soon as he saw Mu Zi here, Luo Feiheng rushed over and held Mu Zi's arm, hugging her waist, and said with a smile, "Sister Mu, are you practicing your saber? Let's spar when we have time. When we're tired, we can take off your clothes and soak in a hot spring. It's so nice." Mu Zi was stunned for a moment. Huh? Hot spring? Luo Feiheng nodded vigorously. That's right. There's a natural hot spring at the 9-branch hall's encampment. If you cultivate in it, it will help speed up your qi. Let's go and try it one day. Chu Xiu held his head and interrupted Luo Feiheng's flirting. Say, what are you doing here today? Luo Feiheng slapped his head and said, "Oh, something happened to that cheap disciple of yours, so I came to pass on the news." Chapter 867. When Luo Feiheng said that his cheap disciple was in trouble, Chu Xiu didn't know who she was talking about at first. Then, he suddenly remembered that Luo Feiheng was talking about Yi Shao. Ever since the Sun and Lu clans matters ended, Yi Shao was thrown to Han Lei and Song Zhao's Heavenly Assassins branch to gain experience. Luo Feiheng could see that Yi Shao was just a cheap disciple of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu also thought so. Chu Xiu gave him a chance, but it was up to him whether he could grasp it or not. Chu Xiu didn't have the leisure to be someone else's nanny, nor did he have the patience to carefully train a disciple. Chu Xiu frowned and asked, what happened to him? Did he fail his mission? Luo Feiheng replied, it's not a failure. It seems like he found something amazing and is being chased. Chu Xiu was stunned when he heard this. Chase after me? Chasing after the Blue Dragon Society? Which sect has the guts to do this? It wasn't that Butiannan didn't do anything good during his time in power. At least, thanks to his crazy personality, the Blue Dragon Society's notoriety wasn't weak. In the past, only the Blue Dragon Society's assassins killed people. No one had ever heard of the Blue Dragon Society being chased. Fuyang Wang clan. Never heard of it. Chu Xiu shook his head. This name sounded like it was some kind of mediocre force. Luo Feiheng said, it's normal that you haven't heard of it. The Fuyang Wang clan isn't that strong in terms of martial arts. They are an aristocratic family that specializes in formations, similar to my foster father's Mirror Lake Villa. The entire clan specializes in formations. The Fuyang Wang clan's ancestor is one of the current generation's formation grandmasters, Wang Daozong. That cheap disciple of yours accepted a mission from the Wang family to kill someone from another small family, and then he seemed to have discovered something wrong. He actually didn't kill the other party, but instead fled, so he was chased by the Wang family. Right now, your Blue Dragon Society doesn't have any reinforcements around Fuyang, so he didn't ask for reinforcements. It was only when he ran into one of my subordinates that he sent the message. Originally, I wanted to help, but the array masters of the Fuyang Wang family are really hard to deal with. I'm not afraid of them one-on-one, but once they start fighting, they will throw out a bunch of messy array formations. It's simply terrible, so I can only come to you. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Zhao's current situation was actually related to Chu Xiu. At present, the Blue Dragon Society was undergoing a great change. Not only did Butiannan die, but many other warriors who were on Butiannan's side also died. Therefore, a large-scale change of power was needed. As a result, all the elites of the Blue Dragon Society and the leaders of the 36 divisions were in the Blue Dragon Society. Yi Shao really couldn't find anyone to help him. However, what made Chu Xiu even more curious was, what did this kid find? Yi Shao knew the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If he was blinded by greed for some common treasures, it definitely didn't fit Yi Zhao's personality. Moreover, the Fu Yang Wang family was a force established by the current generation's formation grandmaster, so everyone had to give the Wang family some face. In reality, the Wang family was just like the Mirror Lake Villa. When they needed someone, they would call them master, master, and master intimately. When they didn't need to use their strength, no matter how much face they had, it was still useless against strength. Therefore, logically speaking, the Wang family wouldn't dare to touch the people of the Blue Dragon Society. But now, the other party actually dared to openly hunt down the people of the Blue Dragon Society. This was simply crazy. Obviously, this Yi Xiao really did find something that the other party really cared about. Chu Xiu thought for a moment and said, after recuperating for so long, "It's time to exercise." "Do you know where Yi Xiao escaped to?" Luo Feiheng shook his head and said, "This Yi Xiao is also very slippery. He secretly ran to many places. I only know his general location, but I really can't find him." "That's fine. Give me the general location, and I will take care of the rest." After getting Yi Xiao's general location, Chu Xiu asked Mu Zi to inform Duanmu Qianshan and left. Seeing that Chu Xiu had left, Luo Feiheng's eyes lit up as he hugged Mu Zi and said, "Little sister Mu, how about we go to the hot spring?" Mu Zi, huh? She still couldn't understand why Luo Feiheng was so obsessed with the hot spring. In a rundown temple in the forest of Fuyang County, Yi Xiao clutched the wound on his abdomen. He endured the intense pain and sprinkled medicinal powder on it. He didn't even dare to make a sound for fear of causing a commotion. He had been chased for several days. The Wang family of Fuyang wasn't considered strong, but they had all sorts of array formation techniques that were hard to defend against. Yi Xiao had never dealt with such a martial artist before, so he had suffered a huge loss when they had just exchanged blows. At the thought of this, Yi Xiao's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. During this period of time in the Heavenly Assassins branch, he had been carrying out missions and cultivating crazily. His persistence had left the other old assassins of the Heavenly Assassins branch speechless. Yi Xiao was so crazy because he knew how difficult it was for him to have everything he had now. He had the cultivation technique that Chu Xiu had given him, but he wasn't considered an official disciple of Chu Xiu. However, because of this identity, although Han Lei and Song Xiao didn't take much care of him in the Assassins division, they still gave him plenty of cultivation resources. Moreover, every time he returned from a mission, the two of them would give him a detailed analysis of what he was lacking in and so on. Yi Xiao knew that all of this was because of Chu Xiu and his identity. Therefore, all he could do was to continuously climb up and make sure that he could keep up with Lord Chu Xiu's footsteps. Including the things he had discovered this time, he could prove to others that he, Yi Xiao, was very useful and not useless. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the rundown temple. More than 10 martial artists surrounded them. Yi Xiao picked up the knife on the ground and said coldly, "Do you know what you are doing? If you kill me today, the Blue Dragon Society will destroy your Wang family in the future. We won't rest until one of us is dead." The leading martial artist of the Wang family took out an array disc and sneered. "If we kill you, who will know that this was done by the Wang family? Every year, countless assassins of the Blue Dragon Society die while carrying out missions. It doesn't matter if you die or not. You can only blame yourself for being greedy. Why did you listen to things that you shouldn't have?" Yi Xiao gritted his teeth and mobilized the blood in his body. He still had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. It was the blood transformation blade that Chu Xiu had taught him in the past. However, this technique consumed his own vital energy. Yi Xiao could not guarantee that he would be able to escape after using the blood-dissipating saber. But apart from risking his life, did he have any other choice? Just as Yi Xiao was about to risk his life, a faint voice sounded. Who was the one who said that he wanted to kill the people of the Blue Dragon Society? A figure wearing a blood-red robe descended from the sky. That powerful aura caused the faces of the people of the Wang family to be filled with fear. What was the most widely spread news in the pugilistic world recently? It was the news that the chief dragon of the Blue Dragon Society, Butian-nan, had been killed in an internal conflict, and the Blue Dragon Society had changed to a new chief dragon. And the clothes of this person in front of them were exactly the same as the new chief dragon of the legends. However, the people of the Wang family never expected that they would provoke the chief dragon of the Blue Dragon Society just because they wanted to kill an ordinary assassin. Before the people of the Wang family could say anything, Chu Xiu waved his hand. Countless blood shadows scattered, and the faces of the martial artists of the Wang family instantly turned pale. Their bodies fell to the ground one after another. In an instant, all the blood in their bodies had been sucked dry. Chu Xiu threw a pill to Yi Shao. After he swallowed it, he asked, "What did you find that made the people of the Wang family ignore your identity as a member of the Blue Dragon Society and hunt you down so arrogantly?" Yi Shao took a deep breath and said something shocking. This subordinate discovered the secret of the battle between the Devil sect master Dugu Weiwei and the immortal Ning Xuanji. Hearing this, Chu Xiu was shocked. One must know that the battle between Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had always been a mystery that had troubled the pugilistic world for 500 years. Because the battle was too intense, there were no spectators at all, and no one dared to go and watch. Moreover, it was said that the area of the battle was extremely wide, from West Kunlun all the way to West Chu, and then to Eastern Qi. In the end, they completely disappeared without a trace. Not even a trace of the battle could be found. Because of this, no one dared to say that Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji were already dead. The old celestial master was from the same era as Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. He was still alive and well. Although he often shouted that his old bones wouldn't last for more than a few years, he had been shouting this for more than 100 years. Until recently, when he fought with Yi Shaonan, he didn't seem to be dying. Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji's strength definitely far exceeded the old celestial masters. Since he was still alive, it was possible that the two of them were still alive. However, after so many years, people in the pugilistic world had also searched for them, but they didn't find any clues. Now that Yi Shao said that he had discovered this secret, how could Chu Xiu not be shocked? Especially since this was closely related to him, Chu Xiu could be said to be the person who wanted to know if Dugu Weiwei was dead or alive the most. Yi Shao calmed himself down and told Chu Xiu the details of the matter. In fact, the reason was simple. He had accepted a mission from the Wang family to assassinate another small family, the Zhou family. The Zhou family was also a family that relied on array formations for generations. However, they had long declined and only relied on selling some low-end array formations for a living. When Yi Shao decided to kill them, the Zhou family immediately guessed that he was sent by the Wang family and told him the secret of why the Wang family wanted to kill him. Because the ancestors of the Zhou family and the Wang family were both at the level of array formation grandmasters, the two of them relied on deducing array formations and finally found the last place where Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji fought. They also discovered the secret of why the two of them disappeared. It was because Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei were so powerful that they could tear the void apart. The last place where the two of them fought happened to be the weakest point in the space. Under the shock of their fight, the void was torn apart and the two of them directly entered another space. Therefore, there was no trace left at all. Chapter 868. What Yi Shao said was indeed shocking, but there was a certain degree of logic to it. People would not disappear into thin air. Even if they disappeared into thin air, they had to leave some traces. The only explanation was that he had entered another space. This was a very reasonable explanation. Chu Xiu asked, "What happened after that? Why didn't the Wang and Zhou families explore that place? Why did they turn against each other now?" Yi Shao said, "According to my inquiry, the Zhou family said that although the space was weak, it was a complete space. It was only because Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei were too strong that they tore it apart. If it were anyone else, even if they were at the heaven and earth mystic realm, they wouldn't be able to do it. Therefore, after they recorded the fluctuations of that space, the weakest position, and other things about formations, they went back to study how to break the space in that place. Originally, the two sides worked together, but they didn't succeed after studying for a lifetime. Their descendants also kept the secret and continued to study, but the power of the two sides was still unbalanced. The Wang family produced several formation grandmasters and became stronger and stronger, while the Zhou family became weaker and weaker. Now, the Zhou family had successfully studied the key to break that space, and the Zhou family believed that if they could do it, the Wang family would definitely be able to do it too. However, after such a long time, the Wang family didn't come to them to work together. Obviously, it was because the Wang family wanted to kill them and monopolize this secret. In fact, the Zhou family's guess was correct. The Wang family hired me to kill the Zhou family's people. After I arrived at the Zhou family told me everything and even gave me the key to break open that space. As he spoke, Yi Xiao handed a round stone and half of a map to Chu Xiu. This was given to me by the Zhou family. He said that an ordinary man's wealth will get him into trouble. The Zhou family should have thought of this long ago, because the Zhou family never had the right to keep this kind of secret. Now that they have finally refined the key that can break that space, it can be considered that they have fulfilled their ancestors' wish and can hand over these things completely. This half of the map is where they found the weakest point in that space. The Zhou family and the Wang family will each take half. Chu Xiu took the so-called key and looked at it. This thing was ridiculously round, and there were circles of patterns on it that looked like growth rings. However, upon closer inspection, it was actually carved with tiny array patterns. Chu Xiu didn't know much about arrays, but this thing didn't look ordinary. Moreover, the Zhou family wouldn't lie to Yi Xiao at this time. Speaking of which, the Zhou clan was quite open-minded. They actually took out a treasure of this level just like that. Of course, from Chu Xiu's point of view, the Zhou family should have completely lost hope in the end. Previously, the Zhou clan still had a glimmer of hope for this matter. However, after seeing that the Wang clan had sent assassins to kill them, the Zhou clan came to a realization that keeping this thing was probably not a treasure but a disaster. Return to the assassins branch first. No, go directly to the Blue Dragon Society and find the second dragon head, Duanmu Qianshan. Ask him to arrange a position in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters for you. After you recover, you can work in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Yes, thank you, Official Chu. Yi Xiao's face was filled with excitement. He knew that as long as he did a good job in front of Chu Xiu, he would be rewarded. In the Blue Dragon Society, the treatment of the Assassin's branch and the headquarters was obviously not on the same level. This was especially so since Chu Xiu had sent Duanmu Qianshan, the second dragon head, to look after him. This time, Yi Xiao did a good job. Of course, this was not only because he brought such big news to Chu Xiu, but also because his way of doing things was very much in line with Chu Xiu's wishes. He knew what he should do and what he shouldn't do. The rules of the Blue Dragon Society were important, but this news was clearly more important than the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. This was called being flexible. Moreover, when Yi Xiao unexpectedly found out that he met the people from the 9 branches, he didn't tell them the truth and only asked them to ask for help. This was enough to prove Yi Xiao's cautiousness. Luo Feiheng could definitely be trusted, but the other 9 branches might not. Even Chu Xiu thought so. Therefore, Yi Xiao's cautiousness also avoided a lot of trouble. The potential he showed this time was enough for Chu Xiu to focus on nurturing him. At this time, in the Fuyang Prefecture's Wang family, Wang Daozong and a few other people in charge of the Wang family were sitting in the main hall with worried expressions, waiting for news. Wang Daozong appeared to be an old man in his 60s or 70s. His appearance was decent and he had a rather sage-like appearance. In Eastern Qi, and even among the formation masters in the entire underworld, he was one of the more famous ones. This was because the Wang family had a legacy. The Wang family's ancestor was a formation master. Although he wasn't as good as the Wang family's ancestor, formation masters in the underworld were incomparably precious. This was especially so for the non-top sections. They didn't have the ability to support formation masters, so they could only ask for help from formation masters like Wang Daozong. Of course, asking for Wang Daozong's help once was not cheap. Moreover, even when some of the top sects were arranging some large arrays, an array Dao Grandmaster would usually be too busy and would ask him for help. At this time, Wang Daozong was no longer as calm as he used to be. He was even a little anxious. He knew how important that secret was to the Wang family. If they found Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji's corpses and obtained their inheritance, the Wang family wouldn't just be a family that only knew how to set up formations in the future. He couldn't imagine that scene at all. After a while, Wang Daozong sighed and said, "If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have asked the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society to do this. I thought that the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society all followed the rules. I didn't expect these people to have no professional ethics at all." A middle-aged man stood up and said, "That's right. I already said that Big Brother's idea was not reliable. Why did he have to find some outsiders? Normally, the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society might follow the rules, but in front of such a precious treasure, who cares about that? It would have been better if we had done it ourselves." A slightly older cultivator said coldly, "Easy for you to say. Back then, you didn't object to this. Do it ourselves? That's easy for you to say. Who in the entire Fuyang prefecture doesn't know about our relationship with the Zhou family? Our two families are aristocratic families. If we act rashly, not only will our Wang family's reputation be tarnished, but it will also arouse suspicion. Besides, apart from formations, who else in the Wang family is proficient in all kinds of killing methods? What if we don't do it well and someone escapes and spreads the news?" Just as the two of them were about to argue, a cultivator suddenly barged in and said loudly, "Family head. Not good. The spirit blood left by Third Master and the others have all turned black. Everyone died in an instant." Hearing this, Wang Daozong immediately swayed and fell into a chair. He murmured, "Something big happened. Something big happened." The so-called spirit blood was a kind of formation that the Wang family had unearthed from ancient records. As long as someone left a drop of blood in the formation, within a month, that person would die, and the blood in the formation would turn black. Normally, this effect should be able to last a lifetime. However, the Wang family's level was limited. They couldn't replicate the complete formation, so this time period was reduced to a month. But no matter how long it took, now that everyone had died at the same time, it could be imagined what kind of enemy they had encountered. There was a 99% chance that the culprit was the Blue Dragon Society. The news had already reached the Blue Dragon Society. Whether it was the Wang family's map of the final battle between Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji, or their key to break through space, these things were enough to arouse the attention of the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, they were ruthless enough to hunt down the Blue Dragon Society. One could imagine what they would encounter. Everyone in the Wang family immediately panicked. This time, they really had no idea what to do. The terror of the Blue Dragon Society was directly linked to the word murder. Their Wang family was an aristocratic family based on the formation Dao. Now that they had provoked a behemoth like the Blue Dragon Society, even if they took out all their trump cards, it would be useless. Wang Daozong sighed and said, "I didn't expect that we would still fail. It seems that this kind of treasure is destined to not belong to our Wang family. Boss, find out the list of all the employers in our Wang family. As long as you can contact them in a short period of time, tell them the cause and effect of this matter." Wang Daozong was a formation master. Although the Wang family itself was inconspicuous, there were many large sects and experts who had cooperated with him. They might not be friends, but they could still contact each other. Not to mention, Wang Daozong wanted to give them such a big piece of news. The Wang family's eldest son suddenly stood up and said, "Father, if you do this, aren't you giving away all the hard work of our Wang family for many generations? From our ancestors until now, won't our Wang family be in vain in the end?" Wang Daozong revealed a bitter smile and said, "What else do you want? With the strength of our Wang family alone, what can we use to resist the Blue Dragon Society? We can only call everyone over. When the time comes, our Wang family will voluntarily offer those things in exchange for the protection of these large sections. We might even be able to win a little favor from them and help our Wang family in the future." At Wang Daozong's age, he had seen a lot of things. Although he was cautious in doing things, he was also much more reliable. At the very least, his idea was much better than being stubborn. At the same time, everyone in the Wang family was also regretting. If they hadn't chosen to keep this secret to themselves and killed their former ally, the Zhou family, they would probably have joined forces to explore that space by now. At that time, there would be Dugu Weiwei's inheritance and Ning Xuanji's inheritance. It would be just right for the two groups to divide it equally. However, greed ruined everything in the end. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.